She's not dead! The words shattered the funeral's silence like thunder through glass. Noah Grant, a broken single father in a borrowed coat, crashed through the crowd of millionaires and mourners, his son clinging to his hand. The golden casket gleamed in the rain. Security moved to tackle him, but Noah's voice cut deeper. Her pulse is still there. She was poisoned. The billionaire's husband went pale. Because some secrets aren't meant to surface, but Noah Grant had just unearthed them all. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this incredible tale travels across the world. Stay until the end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The rain that fell over Riverside Cemetery that October afternoon wasn't the dramatic kind you see in movies. No thunder, no lightning splitting the sky. It was soft and persistent, the kind that soaked into your bones without you noticing until you were already shivering. The kind that made everything look gray and final. Noah Grant stood at the cemetery gates, his worn work boots ankle-deep in mud, his son Eli's small hand gripping his own like a lifeline. The boy was 7 years old, with dark hair that stuck to his forehead and eyes too old for his age, eyes that had seen his mother lowered into similar ground just 2 years prior. "Dad, we shouldn't be here," Eli whispered, tugging on Noah's coat. The fabric was threadbare at the elbows, patched with duct tape on one shoulder. It had been his father's coat once, back when his father had been somebody, back before everything fell apart. "I know, buddy," Noah murmured, his jaw tight. "But sometimes we have to do things even when they scare us." Through the cemetery gates, beneath white funeral tents that snapped in the wind, the city's elite had gathered. Black suits, designer dresses, umbrellas that cost more than Noah's monthly rent. They had come to mourn Vivian Clark, the steel magnolia of the business world, the woman who'd built Clark Industries from a single patent into a multinational empire worth $3 billion. Noah had never met Vivian Clark. He'd only seen her face on magazine covers while waiting in grocery store checkout lines he could barely afford. But he knew her death wasn't what they said it was. Because 3 days ago, Noah had been cleaning the executive floor of Clark Tower, his night shift as a janitor, the only work he could find after losing his paramedic license. And he'd heard something he wasn't supposed to hear. The memory played in his mind like a film reel he couldn't stop. He'd been emptying trash cans in the executive bathroom when voices drifted through the ventilation grate. 2 men, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "The toxin is undetectable," the first voice said. "Clinical, cold. It mimics cardiac arrest perfectly. Even the autopsy won't find anything unusual. Her medical history supports sudden heart failure." "And you're certain she'll appear dead?" The second voice was smoother, more refined. Noah would later recognize it as Richard Clark, Vivian's husband of 15 years. "For approximately 48 hours, yes. The compound induces a death-like state, suspended animation, essentially. But if she's buried during that window..." The doctor's voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like poison itself. "Then we proceed as planned. The funeral is set for Friday. By Saturday evening, my dear wife will be nothing but a memory, and Clark Industries will be mine." Noah had frozen, his hand still gripping an empty coffee cup that someone had tossed toward the trash and missed. His heart had hammered so hard he was sure they'd hear it through the walls. "What about the son?" the doctor asked. "Richard, if this goes wrong, it won't. You've been paid enough to ensure that. Besides, who's going to question the grief-stricken husband? I've already played my part perfectly. The concerned spouse who tried everything to save his dying wife. The media loves a tragic love story." Laughter, cold and hollow. Noah had stood there for what felt like hours after they left, his mind racing. He should call the police, he should tell someone. But who would believe him? A disgraced former paramedic with a record of emotional instability after his wife's death? A janitor with barely $2 to his name? They'd laugh him out of the station. Or worse, they'd arrest him for harassment, for making false claims against one of the city's most powerful men. But he couldn't just do nothing. Because if he was right, if Vivian Clark was going to be buried alive, then in 48 hours a woman would wake up 6 feet under, screaming into satin and darkness until the air ran out. So now he stood at the cemetery gates, watching the funeral proceed, his former medical kit tucked under his coat. The kit he'd kept even after they'd taken his license. The kit that held one small vial of universal toxin neutralizer, an experimental compound he'd helped develop during his residency, before everything fell apart. Mr. Grant. Noah turned to find Father Matthews approaching, the elderly priest who'd presided over Sarah's funeral 2 years ago. The old man's face was lined with concern, his robes dark with rain. "Father," Noah said quietly, "I need to ask you something. Is there any way to stop a burial? Legally, I mean. If someone had reason to believe the deceased wasn't actually dead?" Father Matthew's eyebrows rose. "Noah, what's this about?" Noah's hand tightened around Eli's. "I can't explain, but I need to know. If someone objected during a funeral, could they demand an examination before burial?" The priest studied him for a long moment. "In theory, yes, if there was reasonable cause to suspect. But Noah, objecting to a burial is serious. You'd need evidence. And if you're wrong," he didn't finish, but his meaning was clear. "You'd be destroyed." "I understand," Noah said softly. "Thank you, Father." The priest laid a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, think carefully. These people," he gestured toward the funeral, "they have power. They have lawyers. They can crush a man and not even notice the dust." "I know," Noah replied, "but some things are worth the dust." Father Matthews nodded slowly, then walked away, his robes trailing in the wet grass. "Dad, what are we doing?" Eli asked again, his voice small. Noah knelt down, bringing himself eye level with his son. Rain dripped from his hair onto his face, but he didn't wipe it away. "Eli, do you remember what Mom used to say about doing the right thing even when it's hard?" The boy nodded, his lower lip trembling. "She said that's what heroes do." "That's right." Noah cupped his son's face gently. "Sometimes being a hero means people think you're crazy. Sometimes it means losing things. But it also means that when you lie down at night, you can sleep, because you know you tried." "Are you going to try to save someone, Dad?" Noah's throat tightened. "I'm going to try, buddy. I'm going to try real hard." He stood and took Eli's hand again. Together, they walked through the cemetery gates. The funeral had reached its final stage. The pastor, not Father Matthews, but a younger man Noah didn't recognize, stood before the golden casket, his voice carrying across the wet grass. "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We commit Vivian Clark to the earth from which she came, trusting in God's eternal mercy." The casket began to lower. Noah's heart jackhammered in his chest. This was it. The moment where he either saved a life or destroyed his own. There was no middle ground, no safe path. He thought of Sarah, his wife, dying in his arms after the car accident, how he'd performed CPR for 40 minutes straight, refusing to give up even when the paramedics arrived and told him she was gone, how they'd had to physically pull him away, and how he'd screamed and fought, and how later, during the investigation, they'd called his behavior unstable and dangerous, and used it as one more reason to strip his license. He thought of the nights after, when Eli would wake up crying and Noah would hold him, whispering promises he didn't know if he could keep, promises that things would get better, that they'd be okay. He thought of every time he'd let fear stop him. Every time he'd chosen safety over risk, silence over speaking up. Not this time. "Stop!" Noah's voice cut across the cemetery like a gunshot. Heads whipped around. The casket jerked to a halt, suspended halfway into the grave by mechanical pulleys. "Don't bury her," Noah shouted, pushing through the crowd. People stumbled aside, their faces registering shock, then disgust, as they took in his stained work pants, his patched coat, the desperation in his eyes. "She's not dead. You have to stop the burial." "Security!" A man's voice rang out. Richard Clark, standing at the head of the grave in a perfectly tailored black suit, his face a mask of grief that cracked into fury. "Get this man out of here. Now!" Two large men in dark suits moved toward Noah with practiced efficiency, but Noah was faster, driven by adrenaline and desperation. He ducked under one guard's reaching arm and stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside the half-lowered casket. "Please." He looked up at the crowd of stunned faces. "Please, just listen. My name is Noah Grant. I'm a former paramedic. And I have reason to believe Vivian Clark is not dead, She's been poisoned with a compound that mimics death. The crowd erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped. He's insane. Who let him in? Call the police. This is disgraceful. Silence. The voice that cut through the noise was female, sharp as a blade, aged but strong. An elderly woman stepped forward from the front row of mourners, leaning heavily on a silver-handled cane. She was small and bird-like, dressed in black with a mourning veil pushed back from her face. Her eyes, though red-rimmed with tears, were fierce and intelligent. "Let the man speak," she commanded. "Aunt Margaret, you can't possibly—" Richard Clark began. "I said let him speak." Margaret Clark. Noah recognized her now from business magazines. Vivian's aunt and the original founder of Clark Industries fixed her nephew-in-law with a glare that could freeze hell. "Vivian was my only niece. If there is even the slightest possibility that she lives, we will investigate it. The dead can wait. The living cannot." The security guards hesitated, looking to Richard for guidance. But Margaret's authority, even in her 80s, was absolute. She had built the company Vivian expanded. She was the matriarch, and in this moment, her word was law. Richard's jaw worked silently, rage simmering beneath his grief-stricken facade. But he nodded curtly. "Fine, let the lunatic have his minute. Then we bury my wife in peace." Margaret turned to Noah, who was still on his knees in the mud, his son now visible behind him, being held back by a kinder-looking guard. "Young man, you have 60 seconds. Use them wisely." Noah's hands shook as he reached for his medical kit, but his voice was steady. 3 days ago, I overheard a conversation in Clark Tower. A doctor and another man discussing a toxin, a compound that induces a death-like state for approximately 48 hours. The symptoms would be indistinguishable from cardiac arrest, but the victim remains alive in suspended animation until the compound wears off or is neutralized. "Preposterous," someone in the crowd muttered. "Tetrodotoxin," Noah continued, pulling out his old stethoscope with trembling fingers. "Used in certain cultural practices, incorrectly referred to as zombie poison in popular media. It's real. It's undetectable in standard toxicology screens, and it was used on Vivian Clark." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "And you're certain of this?" "I'm certain enough to stake everything I have on it," Noah said quietly, "which isn't much. But ma'am, your niece's funeral is exactly 42 hours after her declared time of death. That's not coincidence. Someone wanted her in the ground before she could wake up." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Margaret went very still, her knuckles white on her cane. Then she looked at Richard. 42 hours, is that true?" Richard's face had gone pale. "The funeral arrangements were made according to her wishes. Vivian wanted to be cremated," Margaret said softly, dangerously. "She told me so herself, many times. She was terrified of being buried alive. It was a phobia she'd had since childhood. So why, Richard, is my niece in a casket being lowered into the ground?" The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's mouth opened and closed. The doctor, Dr. Pemberton, said that given the circumstances, cremation wasn't advisable. "Legal reasons," he said. "Where is Dr. Pemberton?" Margaret demanded, looking around. "Why isn't he here?" No one answered. Because Dr. James Pemberton, Vivian's personal physician for 10 years, was notably absent from the funeral of his most prominent patient. Margaret turned back to Noah, something new in her eyes. Not quite belief, but no longer dismissal. "What do you need?" Noah had already pulled out the stethoscope. "Permission to examine her. Just a few minutes. If I'm wrong, I'll leave peacefully. You can bury her, and I'll accept whatever consequences come. But if I'm right," his voice broke slightly, "if I'm right, we're about to commit murder in front of 50 witnesses." The crowd shifted uneasily. Rain pattered on umbrellas in the silk-lined casket. Eli watched his father with wide, frightened eyes. Margaret lifted her chin. "Open it." "Aunt Margaret, you can't—" Richard stepped forward, but Margaret raised her cane, pointing it at his chest like a weapon. "Open the casket, or I'll have you removed from the cemetery, Richard. Your choice." For a moment, Noah thought Richard would fight. The man's face had gone from pale to flushed, his fists clenched at his sides. But then he stepped back, his voice tight. "This is madness, complete madness." Two funeral attendants moved forward, their movements slow and uncertain. They released the locks on the casket, and the golden lid rose with a whisper of expensive hinges. Noah forced himself to look. Vivian Clark lay in white silk, her hands folded over her chest. She was beautiful even in death, or apparent death. Her dark hair arranged perfectly, her face peaceful, her skin pale, but not gray. She wore a navy dress, simple and elegant, a string of pearls, no other jewelry. She looked dead. Perfectly, convincingly dead. For a horrible moment, Noah's certainty wavered. What if he was wrong? What if he'd misheard? What if his grief over Sarah, his desperation to save someone this time, had twisted his perception? Then he saw it. The smallest thing, barely perceptible, the hollow of her throat, where a pulse should be visible if you look closely enough. It moved. Once. Barely a flutter. She has a pulse, Noah breathed. Faint, but it's there. He placed the stethoscope against her chest, his hand surprisingly steady now that he was working, falling back into the medical training that had once been his entire identity. At first he heard nothing, just silence and the rain and his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then, there. So soft it was almost imperceptible. A heartbeat. One every 10 seconds. Barely sustaining life, but sustaining it nonetheless. Dear God, Noah whispered. She's alive. She's really alive. Margaret swayed, and someone caught her arm. The crowd pressed closer, a mix of horror and fascination on their faces. You're lying, Richard's voice cracked like a whip. This is a scam. He's trying to... Be quiet, Richard. Margaret's voice was ice. What does she need, young man? Noah was already pulling out the small vial from his kit. His hand shook as he uncapped it. This is a universal toxin neutralizer. Experimental but proven effective against suspended animation compounds. It should counteract the tetrodotoxin and bring her back to consciousness. But I need to administer it orally, and I need her head elevated. Do it, Margaret commanded. If she dies because of this lunatic, Richard began. Then she dies, Margaret snapped. But at least we'll know we tried. Gentlemen, help him position her. The funeral attendants looked at each other, then at Noah, then carefully lifted Vivian's head and upper body, supporting her weight. Noah's old coat, the one he'd laid on the wet grass, became her pillow as they propped her up slightly. Noah's hands trembled as he tilted Vivian's head back gently, opening her mouth slightly. The vial seemed impossibly small in his hands, this tiny glass tube that held either salvation or damnation. Please, he whispered, to God, to Sarah, to the universe. Please let this work. He squeezed 2 drops onto Vivian's tongue. Then nothing. The seconds stretched into eternity. The crowd held its collective breath. Rain fell. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked on the highway beyond the cemetery walls. Noah counted in his head, the way he'd been trained to in medical school. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 15 Mississippi, Vivian's throat convulsed. She's choking, someone yelled. No, Noah said quickly, leaning closer. No, she's swallowing. That's good. That means her reflexes are returning. Vivian's chest moved. A shallow breath, then another. Her fingers twitched against the white silk. My God, Margaret breathed. My God, she's breathing. Then Vivian's eyes snapped open. She gasped, a horrible rattling sound like air being dragged through a straw, and began to cough violently. The funeral attendants nearly dropped her in shock. Noah caught her shoulders, supporting her as her body convulsed, fighting its way back to life. It's okay, he said softly, close to her ear. It's okay. You're okay. Just breathe, nice and slow. You're safe now. Vivian's eyes, dark and confused and terrified, found his. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out at first, just more coughing, more gasping. Her hands clutched at Noah's arms with surprising strength for someone who'd been dead moments ago. The crowd exploded into chaos, screaming, crying, people pulling out phones, someone shouting for an ambulance. Margaret collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. And through it all, Richard Clark stood frozen, his face a mask of absolute horror, because his perfectly planned murder had just failed in front of 50 witnesses. Water, Vivian croaked, her voice like gravel. Need Water. Someone thrust a bottle forward. Noah helped her drink, supporting her head as she took tiny, desperate sips. Easy, he murmured. Not too fast. Your system is still recovering. Vivian's eyes traveled from Noah to the casket she was still partially lying in, to the open grave beside it, to the crowd of stunned mourners. Her face went from confused to comprehending to enraged in the space of a heartbeat. "Richard," she gasped, her eyes finding her husband. Her voice was getting stronger now, fueled by fury. You tried to kill me." Richard's face crumpled. For just a moment, Noah saw genuine emotion there. But it wasn't remorse. It was rage. Pure, impotent rage at a plan gone wrong. "Darling, I don't know what—" Richard began, taking a step forward. "Don't." Vivian's voice cracked like thunder. "Don't you dare. I remember the wine at dinner. I remember you watching me drink it, telling me to finish it all. I remember falling asleep at the table and waking up." Her voice broke. "Waking up in darkness, unable to move, unable to scream, hearing voices around me but not being able to respond, feeling them prepare my body, dress me, watching through my own frozen eyes as they closed the casket lid." She began to sob, her whole body shaking. Noah kept supporting her, his heart breaking for her terror. "Call the police," Margaret said, her voice cold and hard as steel. "Now." Richard turned to run. He made it 3 steps before Eli Grant stuck out his leg. The billionaire hit the mud face first, his expensive suit ruined. Before he could rise, 2 of the largest mourners, men Noah recognized as Vivian's security team, had pinned him down. "Let me go!" Richard screamed, his composure finally shattering completely. "You don't understand. She was going to destroy everything. The company, my reputation, everything. She was going to divorce me with nothing. I built that empire just as much as she did. It was mine. "You built nothing," Vivian said, her voice gaining strength with each word. Noah was still supporting her, but she was sitting up now under her own power, fire returning to her eyes. "I made you, Richard. I took a nobody with an MBA and a smile and made you into someone. And you repaid me by trying to bury me alive." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Margaret made her way to Vivian's side, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my dear child, my dear, dear child." She took Vivian's hand, squeezing it tightly. Then she turned to Noah, her eyes bright with tears and something deeper. "You saved her. You saved my niece. Young man, I don't know who you are or where you came from, but you saved her life." Noah shook his head slowly, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was, how his legs were shaking, how close he'd come to losing everything. I couldn't let another person die if I could prevent it. I couldn't." "Dad!" Eli broke free from the guard and ran to Noah, wrapping his arms around his father's waist. "Dad, you did it! You saved her!" Noah knelt and held his son, and for the first time in years he let himself cry. Great gasping sobs of relief and release, and the overwhelming weight of what had just happened. The police arrived minutes later, 3 squad cars screaming into the cemetery, officers pouring out. Richard was arrested on the spot, screaming about his lawyers and his rights, and how this was all a misunderstanding. Dr. Pemberton's name came up immediately when Vivian gave her statement, and officers were dispatched to his office and home. An ambulance arrived to transport Vivian to the hospital for observation. As the paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher, alive, breathing, furious, she caught Noah's hand. "What's your name?" she asked. "Noah Grant, ma'am." "Noah Grant." She said it like a prayer, like a promise. "I'm going to remember that name. I'm going to remember what you did today." "I just did what anyone would." "No." Her grip tightened. "No, you didn't. You did what almost no one would. You risked everything, your reputation, your freedom, your safety, to save someone you didn't know. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary." Then they took her away, the ambulance lights flashing red and blue against the gray sky. As the crowd dispersed, some people stopped to shake Noah's hand or pat his shoulder. Others avoided eye contact, perhaps ashamed that they'd dismissed him as a lunatic. Margaret stayed the longest, standing with Noah and Eli in the rain. "Where do you live, Mr. Grant?" she asked. "South Side," Noah answered. "The Riverside Apartments." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. She knew that building. Everyone in the city did. It was one step above condemned, a place where people went when they'd run out of other options. And your son? Eli, he's 7. Margaret looked at the boy who was clinging to his father's hand, his hair plastered to his head with rain. Then she pulled out a business card, actual paper, expensive stock, and pressed it into Noah's hand. Come to my office on Monday, she said. 10 o'clock. Don't be late. Ma'am, I appreciate it, but I don't need— Yes, you do. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. You need quite a lot, Mr. Grant, and you're going to let me help you because that's what we do for people who save our family. We take care of them. Understood? Noah's throat worked. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Margaret smiled, the first real smile Noah had seen from anyone all day. Good. Now take your boy home and get warm. And Mr. Grant, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. She walked away, leaning on her cane, her back straight despite the rain. Noah and Eli stood alone in the cemetery as workers began to fill in the empty grave. The golden casket sat abandoned beside it, empty now, its silk lining stained with mud. Dad? Eli said quietly. Yeah, buddy? Is Miss Clark really going to be okay? Noah squeezed his son's hand. I think so. She's strong, and she's got people who love her. Like Mom was strong? Noah's chest tightened. Yeah, like Mom. But you couldn't save Mom. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. Noah knelt in the mud one more time, not caring about his already ruined pants. No, buddy, I couldn't save Mom, and that's going to hurt for a long time, maybe forever. But you know what? Today, I saved someone else's mom, someone else's aunt, someone else's loved one, and that matters too. Eli thought about this for a moment, then nodded. Mom would be proud. Yeah, Noah whispered, pulling his son close. Yeah, I think she would be. They walked home through the rain, hand in hand, neither of them knowing that this was just the beginning, that the funeral Noah stopped would start a chain of events that would change both their lives forever, that the woman he saved would become the family they'd lost, that the risk he took would be repaid 1,000 times over. All Noah knew in that moment was that he'd done the right thing. He'd listened to his instincts. He'd stood up when everyone else sat down. He'd spoken when everyone else was silent. And for the first time since Sarah died, as he walked through the rain with his son's hand in his, Noah Grant felt like himself again. The apartment was exactly as they'd left it that morning, small, cold, and smelling faintly of mildew that no amount of cleaning could eliminate. Noah locked the door behind them, the chain rattling in its track, while Eli kicked off his muddy shoes and headed straight for the bathroom. The boy knew the routine by now. Wash up, change into dry clothes, pretend everything was normal. Noah stood in the narrow hallway, his wet coat dripping onto linoleum that was already warped and stained. His hands were shaking now that the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a hollowness in his chest that felt like hunger but wasn't. He peeled off the coat and hung it on the hook by the door, where it would probably stay damp until he wore it again tomorrow. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Chen next door watching her television too loud, and upstairs, the Rodriguez baby was crying again. Normal sounds. Life continuing as if the world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Noah walked to the kitchen, 3 steps from the hallway, and filled the kettle with tap water. The metal was dented on one side from when he dropped it last month, and the handle was wrapped with electrical tape, but it still worked. Most things in his life were like that now, broken but functional, held together with tape and willpower. Dad? Eli appeared in the doorway, wearing his dinosaur pajamas that were getting too small, the cuffs barely reaching his ankles now. Are we in trouble? Noah set the kettle on the stove, turning the gas on with a click and whoosh of blue flame. What do you mean, buddy? You said that man, Mr. Clark, he tried to kill his wife, and you stopped him, but you also said those people have lawyers and power and stuff. Eli's voice was small, worried. Can they hurt us? Noah's chest tightened. His son was 7 years old and already understood too much about how the world worked, about power and consequences, and the way justice bent for people with money. No child should know those things yet. He knelt down, bringing himself eye level with Eli. The kitchen floor was cold through his wet pants. Come here. Eli walked into his arms, and Noah held him tight, breathing in the scent of his son's hair, baby shampoo and rain, and something uniquely Eli. The truth is, I don't know what happens next, Noah said quietly, but I do know that we did the right thing today. And sometimes, buddy, that's all we can control. Not what other people do to us, but what we choose to do ourselves. Mom used to say that, Eli whispered against his shoulder. She did, and she was right. Noah pulled back, smoothing Eli's hair. But I also think that lady, Mrs. Clark, and her aunt, they seemed like good people. They seemed grateful, so maybe, just maybe, we're going to be okay. Eli nodded, but his eyes were still worried. Can we have hot chocolate? Yeah, we can have hot chocolate. They only had one packet left in the cupboard, the cheap kind that never quite mixed right and always left powder at the bottom of the cup. Noah split it between two mugs, adding hot water and stirring until his wrist ached. Eli sat at the small table, scarred and wobbling on one leg that Noah had propped up with folded cardboard, and wrapped his hands around his mug. Tell me about Mom, Eli said suddenly. Noah looked up from his own mug, surprised. They didn't talk about Sarah often anymore. It hurt too much, like pressing on a bruise that never quite healed. What do you want to know? Tell me about when you saved someone, before Mom died, when you were still a paramedic. Noah sat down across from his son, the chair creaking under his weight. Outside, the rain had picked up again, drumming against the window that didn't quite close all the way, letting in a draft that made the curtains move like breathing. There were a lot of people, Noah said slowly. That was my job, going out on calls, helping people who were hurt or sick. But tell me about one person you saved who really mattered. Noah thought back, sifting through memories that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Finally, one surfaced, clear and vivid. There was a little girl, he said. About your age, actually, 7 years old. Her name was Maya. She had fallen through ice while skating on a pond. This was back in January, maybe 3 years ago. By the time we got there, she'd been under for almost 5 minutes. Eli leaned forward, his hot chocolate forgotten. What happened? We pulled her out, but she wasn't breathing. No pulse. Her lips were blue, and her skin was so cold it was almost gray. Noah could still remember it perfectly. The weight of the child's body, limp and lifeless, her wet hair plastered to her face. Everyone thought she was gone. Even my partner said we should call it. But something in me just couldn't give up. Like today, Eli said softly. Like today, Noah agreed. So I kept doing CPR. I kept breathing for her, kept pumping her chest, kept talking to her even though she couldn't hear me. And after 7 minutes, Eli, which is forever in emergency medicine, she coughed. Water came out of her mouth, and she coughed, and then she was breathing on her own. You saved her. I saved her. Noah smiled, the memory warming him more than the hot chocolate. I saw her about a year later, actually, at the grocery store. She was with her mom, and she was laughing about something, just this normal, happy kid. Her mom recognized me and started crying right there in the cereal aisle. She said Maya was in 2nd grade and loved soccer and had just lost her first tooth. Did it make you feel good, saving her? Noah considered the question. It made me feel like I was doing what I was meant to do. Like all the training, all the hard work, all the times I came home exhausted and covered in other people's blood. It all meant something. Because Maya got to grow up. She got to lose teeth and play soccer and be a normal kid. And that's how you felt today? When you saved Mrs. Clark? Yeah, buddy, that's exactly how I felt. Eli was quiet for a moment, stirring his hot chocolate with his finger, which normally Noah would have scolded him for, but didn't tonight. Finally, the boy said, I'm proud of you, Dad. Noah's throat closed up. He reached across the table and squeezed Eli's hand. I'm proud of you, too. You know why? Why? Because when I needed to get to that funeral, you came with me even though you were scared. You held my hand. And when that man tried to run, you stopped him. You were brave, Eli, just like your mom. Eli's eyes filled with tears. I miss her. Me too, every day. They finished their hot chocolate in comfortable silence, the rain providing a steady backdrop. Eventually, Noah got Eli ready for bed, tucking him in on the pull-out sofa that served as his bedroom in their one-room apartment. The boy was asleep within minutes, exhausted from the day's drama. Noah sat at the kitchen table in the dark, too wired to sleep, his mind replaying everything that had happened. The funeral, Vivian's eyes opening, Richard's face when his plan fell apart, Margaret's promise. That business card was in his pocket, slightly damp from the rain, the raised lettering of Margaret Clark's name embossed in gold. Come to my office on Monday, 10 o'clock. Tomorrow was Sunday. He had one day to prepare for whatever that meeting would bring. Part of him wanted to hope, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, his life was about to change. But another part, the part that had been beaten down by 2 years of rejection and struggle, whispered that hoping was dangerous, that people like Margaret Clark made promises in moments of emotion and forgot them by morning. He pulled out his phone, the screen cracked but still functional, and opened a browser, typed in Vivian Clark and news. The results exploded across his screen. Billionaire Vivian Clark alive, husband arrested for attempted murder. Miracle at Riverside Cemetery, woman wakes from dead. Janitor hero stops burial, saves billionaire's life. There were photos, grainy cell phone pictures taken by funeral attendees. Noah saw himself on his knees in the mud, his hands on Vivian's shoulders as she coughed and gasped. Another showed Richard being dragged away by police, his face twisted in rage. A third showed Margaret with her arm around Vivian at the hospital, both women crying. And there were videos, dozens of them. Noah clicked on one with shaking hands. The footage was shaky, filmed from someone at the back of the funeral crowd. But the audio was clear. "Stop! Don't bury her! She's not dead!" Noah watched himself push through the crowd, heard his own desperate voice explaining about the poison, saw the crowd's reaction. He watched Vivian's chest begin to move, watched her eyes open, watched the moment everything changed. The video had been posted 2 hours ago. It already had 3 million views. "Oh God," Noah whispered. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. The comment section was a mix of reactions. This man is a hero. Faith in humanity restored. Why was a janitor the only one who noticed? The husband should get the death penalty. Someone start a GoFundMe for this guy. Noah closed the browser and set the phone down, his heart racing. He wasn't ready for this. For attention, for scrutiny, for people looking at his life and finding all the broken pieces he'd been trying to hide. He thought about going to Margaret's office on Monday, thought about whatever she wanted to offer him, and for the first time, he let himself consider that maybe accepting help wasn't weakness. Maybe it was just wisdom. Sleep came eventually, fitful, and filled with dreams of caskets and rain and Sarah's voice calling his name from somewhere he couldn't reach. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold. Noah woke to Eli shaking his shoulder, the boy's face pressed close to his. "Dad, there are people outside." Noah sat up, confused, his neck aching from sleeping in the kitchen chair. "What?" "People. With cameras. They're in the parking lot." Noah stumbled to the window and pulled back the curtain. His stomach dropped. There were at least a dozen people in the apartment complex parking lot below, some with professional cameras, others just holding phones. A news van sat at the curb, satellite dish extended. As Noah watched, a woman in a red blazer gestured at his building while talking to a camera. "How did they find us?" Noah breathed. His phone, sitting on the table, began to ring. Unknown number. He declined it. Immediately it rang again. Another unknown number, then another. "Dad, what's happening?" Noah moved away from the window, his mind racing. "Get dressed, buddy. Jeans and your good shirt. We're going out." "But the people—" "Back door. We'll use the back stairs." While Eli changed, Noah threw on clean clothes. His only pair of jeans that didn't have holes, a button-down shirt that was slightly too big because he'd lost weight over the past year. He found his old wallet, mostly empty except for $11 and Sarah's photo. The business card went in his pocket. They made it down the back stairs without being spotted, emerging into the alley behind the apartment complex. Noah held Eli's hand as they walked quickly away from the building, keeping to side streets, avoiding the main roads where news vans might be cruising. "Where are we going?" Eli asked, nearly jogging to keep up with Noah's longer stride. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere quiet." They ended up at St. Michael's Church, the small Catholic parish where Sarah's funeral had been held. Father Matthews was just finishing morning mass when they slipped into the back pew. The elderly priest noticed them immediately, and after the handful of congregants had left, he approached with concern in his eyes. "Noah, Eli, I saw the news." "Everyone saw the news," Noah said quietly. "Father, I need to ask you something. Is there somewhere we can stay just for today? The reporters found our apartment." Father Matthews didn't hesitate. "The rectory has a spare room. You're welcome to it. But Noah, you know this isn't going to go away, right? What you did, saving that woman, it's incredible. People want to hear your story." "I don't want to tell it. I just want to go back to normal." The priest sat down in the pew beside them, his robes rustling. "I understand, but sometimes God has different plans. Sometimes he puts us in positions we didn't ask for because we're the only ones who can handle them." "I can barely handle my own life right now," Noah said, his voice cracking slightly. "How am I supposed to handle this?" "You do what you did yesterday. You put one foot in front of the other. You do the next right thing." Father Matthews smiled gently. "And you accept help when it's offered. Pride is a sin, you know." "So I've heard." The priest stood, his knees cracking. "Come, let's get you both some breakfast. Mrs. Rodriguez made enough tamales to feed an army." The rectory was warm and smelled like coffee and cinnamon. Mrs. Rodriguez, the priest's housekeeper, not related to Noah's upstairs neighbors, fussed over Eli, piling his plate high with food while Noah sat at the kitchen table and tried not to think about what Monday would bring. His phone kept ringing. Noah finally turned it off. "You should check your messages, though," Father Matthews suggested, nursing his own coffee. "Some might be important." Reluctantly, Noah powered the phone back on and opened his voicemail. 53 new messages. He started listening, deleting most after the first few seconds. Reporters, podcasters, someone wanting him to sell his story. Then one made him pause. "Mr. Grant, this is Jennifer Wu from Clark Industries. I'm calling on behalf of Margaret Clark. She wanted me to inform you that your meeting tomorrow has been moved to a secure location due to media attention. A car will pick you up at your apartment at 9:30 a.m. If this number is still active, please text back to confirm. Thank you." "Thank you, Eatgates." Noah replayed it twice, then looked at Father Matthews. "They sent a car. Then you should probably be home to meet it." "What if the reporters are still there?" The priest smiled. "Then you walk past them with your head up. You don't owe them your story, Noah, but you do owe that woman's family your time, after what they promised you." Noah knew he was right. He texted back a simple confirmation. "I'll be there." They spent the rest of Sunday at the church. Eli helped Mrs. Rodriguez in the kitchen while Noah sat in the sanctuary, staring at the stained glass windows and trying to pray. The words wouldn't come, though, just a jumble of fears and hopes and the constant question, what happens now? Evening came too quickly. Father Matthews drove them home in his old sedan, pulling up to the apartment complex where, thankfully, most of the reporters had left. Only one van remained, and the woman in the red blazer perked up when she saw them. "Mr. Grant! Mr. Grant, can we have just a moment?" "No comment," Noah said firmly, keeping Eli close as they hurried to the building entrance. "Is it true you're a disgraced paramedic?" Noah froze, his hand on the door. Slowly, he turned. The reporter smiled, sensing blood in the water. "Our research shows you lost your medical license after a behavioral incident following your wife's death. Some are questioning whether you're really a hero or just someone with a savior complex who got lucky." Noah's jaw clenched. Beside him, Eli's hand tightened on his. "I saved a woman's life yesterday. Whether that makes me a hero isn't for me to decide, but it definitely makes me someone who showed up when no one else would." He pulled Eli inside before the reporter could respond, the door slamming shut behind them with satisfying finality. "What did she mean?" Eli asked as they climbed the stairs. "About you being disgraced?" Noah sighed. They'd reached their floor, the familiar hallway with its flickering fluorescent light and stained carpet. "When Mom died, I was very upset. I acted in ways that scared some people. And because of that, they took away my license to be a paramedic. They said I wasn't stable enough to help people anymore." "But you helped Mrs. Clark." I did. But that doesn't mean everyone will believe in me again, buddy. Some people will always see the mistakes instead of what comes after. That's stupid. Despite everything, Noah smiled. Yeah, it kind of is. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He lay on his makeshift bed, couch cushions on the floor, and stared at the ceiling, watching the play of headlights from the street below. Tomorrow morning, a car would come. Margaret Clark would offer him something. His life would change one way or another. Part of him was terrified, but another part, the part that had rushed into that cemetery, that had trusted his instincts, that had refused to let another person die, that part was ready. At 8:30 Monday morning, Noah had Eli dressed and fed and ready for school. The boy's backpack was packed, his lunch made from the last of their groceries, a peanut butter sandwich, and an apple that was slightly too soft. Are you going to be okay? Eli asked, his eyes worried. I'm going to be fine. You go to school, focus on your work, and I'll pick you up at 3 like always. But what if the car is a trick? What if those people are mean to you? Noah knelt down, straightening Eli's collar. Then I'll leave, and we'll figure out something else. But buddy, I don't think it's a trick. I think maybe, just maybe, something good is about to happen. Eli hugged him tight. I love you, Dad. I love you too. More than anything. Mrs. Chen from next door had agreed to walk Eli to school, as she did most mornings when Noah had to work early. She appeared right on time, her kind face creasing with a smile when she saw them. You're a good boy, she told Noah in her heavily accented English, patting his arm. Saving that woman, your wife, she would be proud. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. After they left, Noah stood in the apartment alone. He'd worn his best outfit, the same button-down shirt from yesterday, now pressed as well as he could manage with their temperamental iron, dark slacks that were only slightly worn at the knees, his only pair of dress shoes that he'd polished until they shone. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. When had he gotten so thin? When had those lines appeared around his eyes? At 9:25, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Car arriving in 5 minutes. Noah grabbed his coat, not the patched one, but an older jacket that at least didn't have visible tape, and headed downstairs. The reporter's van was gone now, the parking lot empty except for the usual resident vehicles and one sleek black town car that was just pulling in. A driver in a proper uniform stepped out and opened the back door. Mr. Grant? That's me. I'm here to take you to Mrs. Clark, if you'll please come with me. The interior of the car smelled like leather and something expensive Noah couldn't identify. He sank into the seat, feeling profoundly out of place, and the driver pulled smoothly out of the lot. They drove through the city in silence, the morning traffic thick around them. Noah watched the streets change as they moved from his neighborhood, run down and forgotten, through the business district, and finally into an area of the city he'd never had reason to visit. Here, the buildings were newer, cleaner, surrounded by landscaped gardens and security gates. The car pulled up to a modern glass structure with Clark Industries etched in steel letters across the front. But instead of the main entrance, they drove around to a private garage where an elevator waited, doors already open. Mrs. Clark is expecting you, the driver said. Top floor. The receptionist will direct you. Noah stepped into the elevator, his reflection staring back at him from multiple mirrors. The ascent was so smooth he barely felt it, and then the doors opened onto a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Everything was white and chrome and glass. The furniture probably costing more than Noah's entire apartment building. A young woman in a crisp suit smiled at him. Mr. Grant, right this way, please. She led him down a hallway lined with photographs, the history of Clark Industries, from a single small factory to a global empire. And there, in many of the photos, was Vivian Clark, shaking hands with presidents and prime ministers, cutting ribbons, speaking at podiums. The receptionist stopped at a set of double doors. They're ready for you. They? But she just smiled and opened the doors. The conference room beyond was enormous, one entire wall made of glass overlooking the city, and sitting at a long table were 3 people, Margaret Clark, stern and elegant in a black suit, a man Noah didn't recognize, perhaps a lawyer, and Vivian Clark herself. Noah stopped in the doorway, his breath catching. He'd seen Vivian wake up in a casket, had watched her cough and gasp back to life, but he hadn't really looked at her. Now, in the clear morning light, he could see her properly. She was probably in her early 50s, her dark hair shot through with gray she didn't bother to hide, her face strong rather than beautiful, her eyes sharp with intelligence. She wore a simple gray dress and pearls, and she was alive, breathing, watching him with an expression Noah couldn't quite read. "Mr. Grant," Margaret said, standing. "Please, come in. Sit down." Noah walked forward on legs that felt unsteady and took the seat they indicated across from the three of them. He felt like he was being interviewed, evaluated, judged. "How are you feeling?" he asked Vivian, because he didn't know what else to say. Her lips quirked in something that might have been a smile. "Alive. Thanks to you. The doctor said another hour in that casket, and the compound would have worn off naturally, but by then—" She didn't finish, but Noah understood. By then she would have woken 6 feet underground, alone in the darkness, and no amount of screaming would have saved her. "I'm glad I got there in time," Noah said quietly. "We all are." Margaret leaned forward, her hands folded on the table. "Mr. Grant?" "Noah, I asked you here because I believe in honoring debts. You saved my niece's life, you risked everything to do it, and I will not let that go unrewarded." "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know, that's precisely why you deserve one." Margaret glanced at the man beside her, the lawyer, Noah assumed. "We've done our research on you, Noah. I hope you don't mind. We know about your history as a paramedic, about your wife's death, about the incident that led to your license being revoked." Noah's hands clenched in his lap. "Then you know I'm not exactly employee of the year material." "On the contrary," Vivian said, speaking for the first time since Noah entered. Her voice was still slightly hoarse, but strong. "We know you're someone who acts on conviction, someone who doesn't give up even when everyone tells them to, someone who sees what needs to be done and does it, consequences be damned." She stood and walked to the window, her back to them as she looked out over the city. "Do you know how many people were at my funeral, Noah?" 53. Business partners, board members, society friends. People who'd known me for years, who'd worked with me, who'd claimed to care about me. And not one of them questioned that I was dead. Not one noticed something was off. Not one had the courage or the instinct to speak up. She turned back to face him. "But you did." A janitor who'd overheard a conversation. A stranger with nothing to gain and everything to lose. You saw the truth that no one else could see, and you acted on it. "What are you offering me?" Noah asked, because he had to know, had to understand what this meeting was really about. Margaret smiled. "A job, to start with. We need someone to head our new safety and wellness division, a department we're creating specifically to address workplace safety, employee well-being, and crisis response. Someone with medical training and real-world experience. Someone who thinks independently and isn't afraid to challenge authority when necessary." Noah stared at her. "You want me to work here, at Clark Industries?" "Not just work here. We want you to build something. This company has gotten too big, too impersonal. We've forgotten that behind every employee number is a real person with real needs. You can help us change that." "I don't have a medical license anymore," Noah said. "I'm not certified for—" "We're not asking you to practice medicine," the lawyer interjected. "We're asking you to use your experience and instincts to make this company safer, to be a voice for people who might not speak up for themselves. And frankly, Mr. Grant, after what you did on Friday, your lack of certification is irrelevant. You've proven your competence." Noah's mind was reeling. "What about my son? He's 7. I'm a single parent. I can't work crazy hours or travel." "The position comes with flexible hours," Margaret said. "And childcare benefits. In fact, there's an excellent private school not far from here that I think young Eli would thrive in. Full scholarship, of course." "Of course," Noah repeated faintly. Vivian returned to the table and sat down across from him, her eyes holding his. "Noah, I'm not going to lie to you. This isn't charity. Even though we owe you everything, we genuinely believe you can help this company. But I also understand if you need time to think about it. This is a lot to process." It was too much, too fast, 2 days ago, Noah had been scrubbing toilets and living paycheck to paycheck. Now he was sitting in a glass tower being offered a position he didn't understand at a salary they hadn't even mentioned yet. "How much does it pay?" he asked, because that was the practical question, the one that mattered when you had $11 in your wallet and a son who needed new shoes. The lawyer slid a paper across the table. Noah looked down at the number and felt the room tilt. "That's annually," Margaret said, watching his reaction. "Plus benefits, including health insurance, dental, vision, and a housing allowance if you need it." The number had more zeros than Noah had seen in his bank account in his entire life, combined. "Why?" he whispered. "Why so much?" "Because that's what the position is worth," Vivian said simply. "Because we can afford it, and you deserve it. And because, frankly, we want to make sure you're comfortable enough that you can focus on the work rather than worrying about where your next meal is coming from." Noah thought of Eli, eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day because that's all they could afford. Thought of their apartment with its broken heater and leaking ceiling. Thought of the fear that woke him at 3 in the morning, wondering what would happen if he got sick, if he couldn't work, if they ended up on the street. He thought of Sarah, too. What she would say if she were here. And he knew exactly what it would be. Take the help, Noah. Let someone catch you for once. You've been falling for so long. "I have conditions," he said, his voice steadier now. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I need time to be a father. School events, sick days, everything. Eli comes first, always." "Agreed," Vivian said immediately. "And I need to know I'm actually doing something meaningful. Not just being parked in an office because you feel guilty. I need real work, real purpose." "You'll have it," Margaret promised. "In fact, I think you'll find yourself busier than you'd like." "And one more thing." Noah took a breath. "I want the chance to reapply for my paramedic license. I know that's not something you can control, but if this company has any influence with the medical board, I want help fighting to get it back. Not because I need it for this job, but because it was taken from me unfairly. And I want to prove that I'm not the broken man they said I was." The three of them exchanged glances. Then Vivian nodded. "We have lawyers, good ones. If you want to appeal the board's decision, we'll back you fully. Pro bono." Noah felt something in his chest loosen, a knot he'd been carrying for 2 years finally starting to unravel. "Then yes." "My answer is yes." Margaret smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Welcome to Clark Industries, Noah Grant. I think this is the beginning of something extraordinary." They spent the next hour going over paperwork, signing contracts, discussing start dates and logistics. Noah would begin in 2 weeks, giving him time to give notice at his current job. Not that the cleaning company would care. And to get Eli enrolled in his new school. As the meeting wrapped up, Vivian walked Noah to the elevator. "There's something I need to say to you," she began, then stopped, her composed facade cracking slightly. "When I was in that casket, trapped in my own body, unable to move or speak, I heard everything. Every word of the funeral, Richard's eulogy, where he spoke about loving me while knowing he'd poisoned me, my aunt crying, my friends sharing memories, and I heard you too." She touched Noah's arm gently. "I heard you fighting for me. I heard your voice so certain, so desperate, and in that moment, trapped in darkness, you were the only light I had, the only hope. So when I say thank you, I'm not just thanking you for saving my life. I'm thanking you for refusing to let me die alone and forgotten, for seeing me when no one else did." Noah's throat was tight. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. Because heroes should be acknowledged, and Noah, you're a hero. Don't let anyone tell you differently." The elevator arrived, and Noah stepped inside. As the doors began to close, Vivian called out, "Bring Eli by sometime. I'd like to meet the boy who raised such a remarkable father." "Oh." Then the doors closed, and Noah was descending, back down to the garage, back to the waiting car, back to his life that was no longer quite his old life, and not yet his new one. The driver took him home. Noah sat in the back seat, staring at the contract in his hands, at the salary figure that still didn't seem real. In 2 weeks, he would start a new job. Eli would start a new school. They would move out of that apartment with its mildew and broken heater. Everything was changing. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. When the car pulled up to his building, Noah thanked the driver and stepped out into the cool morning air. He had hours before he needed to pick up Eli from school. Hours to process everything that had just happened. He went upstairs, unlocked the apartment door, and stood in the middle of their small room. Soon, this would just be a memory. A chapter closed. Noah pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd saved 2 years ago but never called. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Peterson and Associates? How may I help you?" "Hi," Noah said. "My name is Noah Grant, and I'd like to speak to someone about appealing a medical board decision. I understand Clark Industries has an account with your firm." There was a pause, then, "Yes, Mr. Grant. We've been expecting your call. Let me transfer you to Mr. Peterson directly." As the hold music played, Noah looked around the apartment one last time as it was now, small and cold and barely sufficient. But it had kept them safe. It had been enough. Sometimes enough was all you needed until better came along. And better, it seemed, had finally arrived. The phone call with Mr. Peterson lasted 47 minutes. By the end of it, Noah had an appointment scheduled for Thursday to review his case, and the lawyer had assured him that with Clark Industries' backing, his chances of getting his license reinstated were extremely favorable. Those were the exact words Peterson had used, his voice smooth and confident in a way that made Noah want to believe him. After hanging up, Noah sat on the edge of the kitchen chair and let himself feel it, not just the hope, but the fear that came with it. Because hope was dangerous. Hope made you vulnerable. Hope meant that when things fell apart, and they always seemed to fall apart, the crash hurt worse than if you'd never climbed at all. But Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, clear as if she were standing beside him. "Noah, stop protecting yourself from disappointment and start letting yourself dream again. You can't live in the wreckage forever." She'd said that to him once, years ago, when he'd been afraid to apply for the advanced paramedic training program. Afraid he wasn't good enough, afraid he'd fail, afraid of 1,000 things that never actually happened. She'd pushed him to apply anyway, and he'd gotten in, and those 2 years of training had been some of the best of his life. Maybe it was time to listen to her wisdom again. Noah glanced at the clock. 12:30. He had 2.5 hours before school pickup, enough time to do something he'd been putting off for months. He found the box under his makeshift bed, buried beneath old blankets and shoes that didn't fit anymore. The cardboard was worn soft at the corners, the tape yellowed with age. He'd packed it the week after Sarah's funeral and hadn't opened it since. His hands shook as he pulled back the flaps. Inside were the pieces of his old life. His paramedic uniform, cleaned and folded. His name badge, the plastic scratched from years of use. Textbooks from medical school, their spines cracked from constant reading. Certificates of completion for various trainings. Photos of him and his old crew, Marcus, Jen, David, all of them grinning in front of the ambulance, exhausted after a double shift but alive in a way Noah hadn't felt in years. And at the bottom, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was Sarah's stethoscope. She'd been a nurse, had worked in the pediatric ICU, and her stethoscope had been her most prized possession. Bright purple with tiny stars on it, chosen specifically to make the children smile when she listened to their hearts. Noah lifted it out, the weight familiar in his hands. He pressed it to his chest, over his own heart, and listened. The steady thump, 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 still beating, still fighting. "I'm trying, Sarah," he whispered to the empty apartment. "I'm really trying." He carefully repacked everything except the stethoscope, which he placed on the kitchen counter where he could see it, a reminder, a promise. Then he did something he hadn't done in months. He cleaned. Not just the basic maintenance that kept them from drowning in mess, but really cleaned. He scrubbed the kitchen counter until it shone, washed the windows until they were clear, organized their few possessions into neat arrangements. He threw out clothes that were beyond repair, made a list of things they'd need for the new apartment, whenever that happened. And by the time he finished, the place looked almost decent. It was still small and cold and imperfect, but it was cleaner. And somehow, that felt like progress. At 2:45, Noah walked to Riverside Elementary to pick up Eli. The school was a 10-minute walk from their apartment, a squat brick building with a chain-link fence and a playground that had seen better days. Noah stood with the other parents at the gate, most of them mothers who clutched coffee cups and chatted about things he never quite caught the thread of. He saw Mrs. Martinez, Eli's teacher, before she saw him. She was young, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes and infinite patience. She'd been good to Eli this year, understanding when he struggled to focus, gentle when he got upset about things other kids shrugged off. "Mr. Grant," she called, waving him over. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Noah's stomach tightened. Those words never meant anything good. Of course. She led him a few steps away from the other parents, her expression concerned but not unkind. "I wanted to let you know that Eli had a rough day today. During reading time, some of the other students were talking about the news, about you and Mrs. Clark. One of them said something about you being famous, and another child said their parents called you a wannabe hero." Eli got very upset. Noah's hands clenched into fists. "Did he say anything? Do anything?" "He cried," Mrs. Martinez said softly. "Just sat at his desk and cried quietly. When I asked him what was wrong, he said he was worried that people were going to hurt you because you did something good." "Mr. Grant, I don't know all the details of what happened this weekend, but I can see it's affecting Eli. He's carrying adult worries that he shouldn't have to carry." "I know," Noah said, his voice rough. "I'm working on it. Things are going to change soon. Better school, better situation. I'm trying to give him better." Mrs. Martinez touched his arm gently. "You're a good father, I can see that. But make sure in trying to give him better circumstances, you don't forget to just be present. That's what he needs most." The bell rang before Noah could respond, and then Eli was there, his backpack dragging on the ground, his face blotchy from crying. He saw Noah and ran, wrapping his arms around his father's waist with such force that Noah stumbled back a step. "Hey, buddy," Noah murmured, stroking Eli's hair. "Rough day." Eli nodded against his chest, but didn't speak. Noah thanked Mrs. Martinez and guided his son away from the school, away from the other parents and their curious stares. They didn't go straight home. Instead, Noah led them to the small park 3 blocks over, just a few swings and a slide, the paint peeling and the chains rusty, but it was empty this time of day. They sat on the swings, neither of them pumping their legs, just sitting in the cooling afternoon air. "Want to talk about it?" Noah asked finally. Eli kicked at the dirt beneath his swing. "Tommy Baker said his dad said you're just a janitor who got lucky, that you probably made the whole thing up for attention." Noah's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice calm. "And what do you think?" "I think Tommy Baker's dad is stupid." Eli's voice was fierce, almost angry. "I was there, Dad. I saw you save her. I saw you be brave when everyone else was scared." "That's right, you did. So Tommy Baker's dad's opinion doesn't really matter, does it? But other people believe him. I heard Mrs. Jensen at drop-off this morning telling another mom that you probably have issues. She said it like you're broken." There it was. The thing Noah had been afraid of. The shadow that followed him everywhere. His past. His supposed instability. The reputation he couldn't seem to escape no matter how hard he tried. "Eli, look at me." Noah waited until his son's eyes met his. "I am broken. In some ways. Losing your mom broke something in me that I don't know if I can ever fully fix. But being broken doesn't mean being useless. Sometimes the broken places are what let the light in. And yeah, I made mistakes. Big ones. I scared people when I was hurting, and I lost my job because of it. But I'm still here. I'm still fighting. And I saved a woman's life because I trusted myself even when no one else did. So being broken is okay. Being broken is human. What matters is what you do with the broken pieces. Do you hide them and pretend everything's fine? Or do you pick them up and build something new?" Eli thought about this, his swing swaying slightly in the breeze. "What are you building?" Noah smiled, thinking of the contract in his pocket, the lawyer's appointment, the new school, all of it. "I'm building us a better life, buddy, starting now." "How?" "Remember Mrs. Clark, the lady I saved? She offered me a job, a real job with good pay and benefits. You're going to go to a new school, a better one. We're going to move to a better apartment. Things are going to change." Eli's eyes widened. "Really? When?" "Soon. 2 weeks until I start the new job. We can start looking at apartments this weekend." Noah hesitated, then added, I know change is scary, but this is good change. I promise. Will the new school have kids who think you're a hero? The new school will have kids who don't know anything about me except that I'm your dad, and that's all they need to know. They stayed at the park until the sun started to sink, painting the sky orange and pink. On the walk home, Eli's hand was warm in Noah's, and the boy chattered about what he wanted in a new apartment. His own room, he said, with space for his books and maybe a fish tank. Small dreams, but they felt enormous to Noah, who had spent so long just trying to keep them housed and fed that dreaming of anything more had seemed impossible. When they reached their building, there was an envelope taped to their door. No postage, no return address, just Noah Grant written in elegant script. Inside was a handwritten note on thick, expensive paper. Noah, thank you again for everything. I wanted you to have this before you start your new position. Consider it a signing bonus and a token of gratitude from someone whose life you saved. Use it for whatever you and Eli need. You've earned it. Vivian. Beneath the note was a check. Noah stared at the amount, his vision blurring slightly. $50,000. Dad, what is it? Eli asked, trying to peer over his arm. Noah carefully folded the check and note, his hands shaking. It's a gift. A very generous gift. How much? Enough to change everything, buddy. More than enough. That night after Eli was asleep, Noah sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, ancient and held together with more hope than hardware, and started searching for apartments. Not in their current neighborhood, but in better areas. Places with good schools nearby, playgrounds that weren't broken, streets that felt safe after dark. He found a 2-bedroom in the Riverside Heights area, 15 minutes from Clark Industries. The photos showed hardwood floors, large windows that actually opened, a kitchen with appliances that looked less than 20 years old. The rent was 3 times what he currently paid, but with his new salary, it was manageable. More than manageable. He filled out an application, attached proof of his new employment. Margaret had emailed him an offer letter that afternoon, and hit submit before he could second-guess himself. Then he opened a new tab and searched for private schools near Riverside Heights. Riverside Academy appeared first in the results. The website showed children in neat uniforms, smiling in bright classrooms with actual art on the walls and computers that weren't ancient. The curriculum included music, art, physical education, even a garden program where students learned to grow vegetables. It looked like something from another world. Noah clicked on the admissions page, his heart sinking when he saw the tuition. But then he remembered Margaret's words. Full scholarship, of course. He sent an email to the admissions office mentioning Margaret Clark's name, feeling slightly guilty for using her influence, but knowing it was what she'd intended, and asking about enrollment procedures for Eli. The response came within 20 minutes, even though it was nearly 9 at night. They'd be delighted to meet with Eli, the director wrote. Could they come in Friday morning for a tour and assessment? Noah stared at the email, reading it 3 times to make sure it was real. Then he typed back, "Yes, thank you. We'll be there." Thursday arrived too quickly. Noah had taken the day off from his janitorial job. Not that his supervisor cared, they barely noticed when he was there, and dressed in his best clothes again. The meeting with Mr. Peterson was at 10. The law office of Peterson and Associates occupied the 23rd floor of a downtown high-rise. All polished wood and leather chairs and the kind of quiet that only money could buy. Noah felt out of place immediately, his shoes squeaking slightly on the marble floor, but the receptionist greeted him warmly, and within minutes he was ushered into Mr. Peterson's office. The lawyer was in his 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of confidence that came from winning more cases than he lost. He shook Noah's hand firmly and gestured for him to sit. "Mr. Grant, I've reviewed your case file. The medical board sent it over yesterday. I have to say, what happened to you was unconscionable." Noah blinked. "I'm sorry?" Peterson opened a folder on his desk, his expression darkening as he read. "You lost your license because of behavioral concerns stemming from your response to your wife's death. Specifically, you were deemed emotionally unstable because you performed CPR on your wife for over 40 minutes, refused to accept that she had died, and became agitated when other paramedics attempted to take over." He looked up. "Is that accurate?" "Yes," Noah said quietly. "I couldn't let her go. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, longer, she'd come back. And when they pulled me away, I fought them, physically fought them. They had to restrain me. Because your wife had just died in your arms, Peterson said, his voice hard. Because you were in shock and grief. Any reasonable person would have been distraught. But instead of offering you counseling or leave or support, the department launched an investigation. They brought up every minor complaint ever filed against you. Times you were short with dispatch, times you questioned a supervisor's decision, times you went against protocol to save someone. He tapped the file. This isn't a record of instability, Mr. Grant. This is a record of someone who cared too much in a system that prefers people who care just enough. Noah's throat was tight. Can you fix it? I can get your license reinstated, yes. It'll take time, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. We'll need character witnesses, evidence of your continued competence, psychiatric evaluation to prove you're stable. Peterson leaned back in his chair. But Mr. Grant, I want you to understand something. Once we start this process, your life is going to be under scrutiny. Every decision you've made since your wife's death, every job you've lost or kept, every moment of your life with your son, it's all going to be examined. The board won't make this easy. I know, Noah said, but I need to do it anyway. Not because I need the license for my new job, because I need to prove to myself, to Eli, to everyone, that I'm not the broken man they said I was. Peterson smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Then let's prove them wrong. I'll file the appeal paperwork today. We'll schedule your psychiatric evaluation for next week. And Mr. Grant, I've been doing this for 30 years. I can tell when someone's genuinely unstable and when they're just genuinely human. You're the latter. We're going to win this. The meeting lasted another hour, going over details and timelines and what Noah should expect. When he finally left the office, his head was spinning, but his heart was lighter than it had been in years. He had the rest of the afternoon free before picking up Eli, so he did something impulsive. He went to a phone store and bought a new phone. Not top of the line, but functional, with a screen that wasn't cracked and a battery that lasted more than 2 hours. He transferred his number and contacts, then called Eli's school to update their emergency information. Then he walked to a men's clothing store. Not an expensive one, just a regular chain store in a strip mall, and bought himself 2 new shirts, a pair of slacks, and dress shoes that didn't squeak. The total made him wince, but he had Vivian's check deposited now, and he could afford it. He caught his reflection in a store window on the way out and barely recognized himself. He looked almost professional, almost like someone who belonged in an office tower. Friday morning, Noah and Eli stood outside Riverside Academy, both of them wearing their best clothes and matching nervous expressions. The building was beautiful, red brick with white columns surrounded by trees that were just starting to turn autumn colors. Children laughed in the playground behind an iron fence, their voices bright and unself-conscious. Fancy, Eli whispered, gripping Noah's hand. It is, Noah agreed. But fancy doesn't mean better people, remember, just better resources. You're smart and kind, and that matters more than anything else. The director, Mrs. Patricia Hammond, met them in the entrance hall. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a cardigan that looked soft and comfortable. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. Mr. Grant, Eli, welcome to Riverside Academy. Please, come to my office. They followed her through hallways lined with student artwork and awards, past classrooms where children sat in small groups rather than rows, where teachers moved between desks helping individually rather than lecturing from the front. Everything felt different from Eli's current school, calmer, more intentional. In Mrs. Hammond's office, they sat in comfortable chairs while she pulled out Eli's file, already surprisingly thick. I spoke with Mrs. Clark, she began, looking at Noah over her reading glasses. She speaks very highly of you. And what you did last Friday, saving Mrs. Vivian Clark, well, that was remarkable. But I want to be clear, Mr. Grant, we're not admitting Eli because of what you did. We're admitting him because we believe he'll thrive here. I understand, Noah said. Good. She turned to Eli, her expression softening. Now, young man, tell me about yourself. What do you like to do? Eli glanced at Noah for reassurance, then said quietly, I like to read. And I like science. And I want to be a doctor someday. like my mom was going to be. Your mother wanted to be a doctor? She was a nurse, Eli said, but she was going to go back to school before she died. Mrs. Hammond's expression gentled further. I'm sorry for your loss. Losing a parent is incredibly difficult. She paused, then added, You know, we have a wonderful science program here, and we partner with the Children's Hospital downtown for a junior volunteer program. Students in 4th grade and up can go once a month and learn about different medical careers. Would that interest you? Eli's eyes widened. Really? Really? Of course you'd need to keep your grades up and follow all our behavioral expectations, but I think you'd do wonderfully. They spent another hour touring the school. Eli saw the library, 3 times the size of his current schools, and the music room with actual instruments, and the art studio with pottery wheels. In the cafeteria, the food looked like actual food rather than whatever mystery substance they served at Riverside Elementary. As they were leaving, Mrs. Hammond pulled Noah aside. We'd be honored to have Eli start Monday if you're ready. I know that's fast, but Margaret suggested you'd want to get him settled before you start your new position. Monday would be perfect, Noah said. Thank you for all of this. Thank you for raising such a thoughtful young man. And Mr. Grant, what you did last week, standing up when no one else would, trusting your instincts, saving a life, that's exactly the kind of courage we try to teach our students. Eli is lucky to have you as an example. On the walk back to their apartment, Eli couldn't stop talking about the school, about the science program, about the library, about everything. Noah listened, his heart full in a way it hadn't been since Sarah died. That weekend, they packed their entire apartment into boxes. It didn't take long, they didn't own much. But each item Noah wrapped in newspaper felt significant. Sarah's books, Eli's baby clothes that Noah couldn't quite bring himself to donate, the mixing bowls Sarah had used to make cookies every Sunday, pieces of a life they'd had, pieces they were carrying into whatever came next. On Sunday afternoon, the new apartment's leasing office called. They'd been approved, and they could move in immediately if they wanted. We want, Noah said. Father Matthews provided a truck, or rather, organized 3 men from the parish to help move, which took exactly 1 trip because they owned so little. By Sunday evening, Noah and Eli stood in their new apartment with its hardwood floors and working appliances and 2 bedrooms, 2 actual bedrooms, with doors that closed and windows that opened. Eli ran from room to room, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. Dad! Dad! I have my own room, with a closet! It was safe. It was the beginning of something new. We made it, Sarah, he whispered to the empty apartment. We actually made it. Monday morning arrived crisp and cool, autumn asserting itself after a long summer. Noah woke early, made breakfast in their new kitchen, just cereal and toast, but somehow it tasted better here, and got Eli ready for his first day at Riverside Academy. The boy looked sharp in his new uniform, navy pants, white polo shirt, a sweater vest that Noah had bought over the weekend. His backpack was new too, with actual padding on the straps and compartments that zipped properly. How do I look? Eli asked, standing nervously by the door. Like someone who's going places, Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. Like someone who's going to do great things. They walked to the school together, Noah's hand on Eli's shoulder. Other parents were dropping off their children, most arriving in cars much nicer than any Noah had ever owned. But no one stared, no one whispered. They were just another parent and child, unremarkable. At the entrance, Mrs. Hammond was greeting students personally. She smiled when she saw them. Eli, welcome. Your classroom is down the hall, 3rd door on the right. Mrs. Peterson is expecting you. Eli looked up at Noah, fear flickering in his eyes. What if they don't like me? Noah knelt down, not caring that his new slacks were getting dirty on the sidewalk. Then they don't like you, and that's their loss. But buddy, I don't think that's going to happen. You're smart and kind and brave. Be yourself, and the right people will see it. Like you did with Mrs. Clark? Exactly like that. Eli hugged him tight, then squared his shoulders and walked through the doors. Noah watched until he disappeared around the corner, then stood there for another moment, his heart in his throat. He'll be fine, Mrs. Hammond said gently. We'll take good care of him. I know, it's hard to let them go, even for a day. I understand. She paused, then added, Mr. Grant, you start at Clark Industries today, don't you? In 2 hours. Then you should probably go prepare. And don't worry about Eli. If there are any problems, we'll call immediately. But I suspect he's going to surprise you with how well he does. Noah thanked her and walked back to the apartment. He showered, shaved, dressed in one of his new shirts and the slacks he hadn't gotten dirty. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror, a mirror that was clean and well lit, not cracked like the old one, and saw someone he'd almost forgotten, a professional, someone competent, someone who belonged in the world he was about to enter. At 9:30, another town car arrived to take him to Clark Industries. The same driver from before, who greeted him by name and held the door open. The ride downtown was surreal. Just 2 weeks ago, Noah had been scrubbing floors in this building. Now he was being driven to the front entrance, where Margaret Clark herself was waiting. Noah, she said, shaking his hand warmly. Welcome. Are you ready for your first day? Honestly, I'm terrified. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Good. That means you care. Come, let me show you your office. They took the elevator to the 15th floor. Not the executive level, but not the basement either. Margaret led him down a hallway to a corner office with windows overlooking the city. The nameplate on the door read Noah Grant, Director of Safety and Wellness. Inside was a desk, real wood, not particle board, a leather chair, a computer that was probably worth more than everything Noah had owned before this week, and shelves waiting to be filled with books and personal items. This is yours, Margaret said. We've assigned you an assistant, Rachel. She's wonderful. And you'll report directly to the executive board, which includes both myself and Vivian. Your first project is to conduct a comprehensive safety audit of all our facilities. We have 17 locations across the country. You'll have a budget, a team, and complete authority to implement whatever changes you deem necessary. Noah walked to the window, looking out over the city that had chewed him up and spit him out 2 years ago. The same city that was now giving him a second chance. I won't let you down, he said quietly. I know you won't. Because Noah, you're not someone who gives up. You've proven that. Margaret checked her watch. The executive board meeting starts in 20 minutes. They want to meet you officially, welcome you to the team. After that, Rachel will help you get oriented, show you the systems, introduce you to department heads. Wait, I'm meeting the board today? Now? Is that a problem? I thought I'd have time to prepare. Margaret smiled. Noah, you've been preparing for this your entire life. You just didn't know it. Now come on, let's show them who we hired. The boardroom was intimidating, a long table surrounded by powerful people in expensive suits. But when Noah entered, they stood, all of them. And Vivian Clark, sitting at the head of the table, smiled at him like he was exactly where he belonged. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice clear and strong, I'd like to introduce Noah Grant, the man who saved my life and who is going to help us revolutionize how this company thinks about safety and wellness. Noah, welcome to Clark Industries. We're honored to have you. The board members applauded. And Noah, standing there in his new shirt with his new job and his new life, felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. He felt like he mattered, like he had purpose. Like the broken pieces of who he'd been were finally forming something whole. He thought of Eli in his new school, making friends, learning, thriving. He thought of Sarah, watching from wherever she was, proud of how far they'd come. He thought of the cemetery in the rain, the moment he'd chosen to speak up instead of stay silent, to act instead of accept. That moment had changed everything. And now, standing in this boardroom surrounded by people who believed in him, Noah understood that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to let the world stay as it is when you know it could be better. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply not give up, especially when everyone else already has. The first 3 months at Clark Industries passed in a blur of meetings, site visits, and late nights poring over safety reports that made Noah's blood run cold. The company was successful, yes, but that success had been built on the backs of workers whose concerns were routinely dismissed, whose near misses were filed away and forgotten, whose injuries were treated as acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of profit. Noah's office became a sanctuary for the employees others ignored. Word spread quickly through the company. There was someone on the 15th floor who actually listened, who didn't dismiss concerns as exaggeration or paranoia, who treated warehouse workers and executives with the same respect. Rachel, his assistant, kept his calendar manageable and his coffee cup full. She was in her early 30s, sharp as a blade, and had worked at Clark Industries for 8 years. On Noah's second week, she'd knocked on his office door with a stack of folders that reached her chin. "These are complaints that never made it past middle management," she'd said, dropping them on his desk with a thud that echoed through the office. 12 facilities spanning 4 years, everything from faulty equipment to harassment to safety violations that should have shut down entire production lines. Noah had stared at the pile, his stomach sinking. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you're the first person in this position who I think will actually do something about it." Rachel had crossed her arms, her expression fierce. The last director treated this position like a stepping stone to something better. He rubber-stamped whatever the production managers wanted and took long lunches. "You're different. Everyone can see it. So here's your ammunition. Use it." He'd spent that entire night reading through the complaints. A maintenance worker in the Chicago facility who'd reported faulty wiring 3 times before finally being electrocuted survived, but with permanent nerve damage. A shipping supervisor in Atlanta who'd documented sexual harassment by her manager for 6 months before finally quitting. A machine operator in Seattle who'd lost 2 fingers because the safety guard on his equipment had been removed to increase production speed. By dawn, Noah had made a list of 17 facilities that needed immediate attention and 43 specific violations that required investigation. He'd also drafted a new company policy. Any safety concern raised by any employee, regardless of position, would receive a response within 24 hours and a full investigation within 1 week. Retaliation against employees who raised concerns would result in immediate termination, no exceptions. He'd presented it to the executive board the following Monday. Several board members had balked at the cost, at the disruption to production schedules, at the precedent it would set. Then Vivian had leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Gentlemen, I was buried alive because someone prioritized their own interests over my well-being. I will not allow this company to operate on the same principle. Mr. Grant's policy is now company policy, effective immediately. Anyone who has a problem with that can tender their resignation today." No one had argued after that. Now, 12 weeks into his tenure, Noah was standing in the Chicago facility with a clipboard, a hard hat, and a growing sense of fury. The electrical systems were worse than the reports had indicated. Exposed wiring, overloaded circuits, equipment that sparked when turned on. The facility manager, a man named Dennis Chen, stood beside him with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. "This is all up to code," Chen insisted. "We passed our last inspection." "When was that inspection?" 3 years ago." Noah turned to face him directly. "Mr. Chen, I've been a paramedic. I've pulled bodies out of buildings that look safer than this. This facility is a death trap and you know it. Production quotas don't matter if your workers are dead." Noah's voice was hard, brooking no argument. "I'm shutting down this facility until every violation is corrected. Maintenance starts today. Workers will be paid full salary during the shutdown. And Mr. Chen, you're going to personally oversee the repairs, and you're not going to leave until this place meets not just code, but the highest safety standards in the industry." Chen's face flushed red. "You can't just shut down an entire facility. Do you know how much revenue we'll lose?" "Less than we'd lose in lawsuits when someone dies." Noah pulled out his phone and called Margaret directly, putting it on speaker. "Mrs. Clark, I'm at the Chicago facility. I'm shutting it down for emergency repairs. Estimated timeline is 2 weeks. There was a pause, then Margaret's voice came through, calm and authoritative. "Mr. Chen, are you there?" "Yes, ma'am." "Whatever Mr. Grant says goes. If he says shut it down, you shut it down. If he says rebuild it from the ground up, you rebuild it. Are we clear?" Chen's jaw worked silently. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Noah, send me the full report by end of day. And good work." After she hung up, Chen stormed off, leaving Noah alone in the cavernous warehouse. The workers, about 40 of them, watching from a safe distance, slowly approached. "Is it true?" a woman asked, her accent marking her as first-generation immigrant, maybe Eastern European. "You're really fixing this place?" "Every inch of it," Noah promised. And I want you all to know something. If you ever see something unsafe, something wrong, you call me directly. My number is going to be posted in every break room, every facility, every office. You don't go through your manager or your supervisor. You call me, and I will fix it. A man in the back, probably in his 50s with graying hair and calloused hands, spoke up. Why should we believe you? The last guy who promised change did nothing. Because I'm not the last guy. Noah met his eyes steadily. 3 months ago, I was a janitor making minimum wage, trying to keep my kid fed. I know what it's like to be ignored, to be treated as disposable. And I'm telling you right now, you're not disposable. Not to me. Not to this company. Not anymore. The woman who'd spoken first started crying. Noah didn't understand why until she said, My husband, he worked here 6 years ago. He complained about the wiring. They fired him, said he was making trouble. We lost our apartment, had to move in with my sister. She wiped her eyes roughly. If someone had listened to him, then, I'm listening now, Noah said quietly. And I'm sorry it took so long. He spent the rest of the day documenting every violation, photographing every hazard, interviewing every worker who wanted to share concerns they'd been too afraid to voice. By the time he flew back to the city that evening, he had enough material to keep him busy for months. Eli was waiting at their apartment when Noah got home. The new apartment, the one with heat that worked and windows that didn't leak. The boy was at the kitchen table doing homework, and he looked up when Noah entered, his face lighting up. Dad, you're home. How was Chicago? Productive. Noah dropped his bag by the door and went to hug his son. How was school? Really good. We started a new science unit on ecosystems, and Mrs. Peterson said my presentation on food chains was the best in the class. Eli's excitement was palpable, so different from the quiet, withdrawn child he'd been just 3 months ago. Oh, and I got invited to Marcus's birthday party next weekend. Can I go, please? Noah smiled, ruffling Eli's hair. Of course you can go. We'll need to get him a present. What is Marcus like? Books. He loves books about space. Then we'll find him the best space book we can. Noah glanced at the homework spread across the table, math problems that looked significantly more challenging than what Eli had been doing at his old school. Need help with any of this? Nah, I got it. Mrs. Peterson explained everything really well. Eli hesitated, then added, Dad, are you happy with your job and everything? It was such an adult question from such a young child. Noah sat down across from him, thinking about how to answer honestly. It's hard work, harder than I expected. I see things that make me angry, things that should have been fixed years ago. But yeah, buddy, I'm happy. Because I'm making a difference. I'm helping people who need help. That feels good. Like when you saved Mrs. Clark? Like that. Just in smaller ways every day. Eli nodded thoughtfully, then returned to his homework. Noah watched him for a moment. This resilient, brave kid who'd survived losing his mother and 2 years of poverty and uncertainty. He was thriving now, making friends, excelling in school, laughing more. It was everything Noah had dreamed of. His phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Saw your Chicago report. Board meeting tomorrow at 9 to discuss facility improvements company-wide. Great work. Noah texted back a simple thanks, then started making dinner. Real food. Chicken and vegetables and rice. Not the ramen and canned soup they'd subsisted on for so long. While the chicken cooked, he checked his email and found a message from Mr. Peterson. The subject line read, Good news. Noah's heart raced as he opened it. The psychiatric evaluation had come back with a glowing report. The evaluator had written that Noah showed remarkable emotional stability considering his traumatic history and demonstrated appropriate coping mechanisms and self-awareness. Peterson had already submitted the appeal to the medical board, along with character references from Vivian, Margaret, Father Matthews, and 3 of Noah's former colleagues who'd vouched for his competence and integrity. The board would review his case in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Noah whispered to himself. 6 weeks until he might get back the credential that had defined him, that had been stripped away when he'd needed it most. Over dinner, Eli chattered about school and his friends and the science fair project he was planning. Noah listened, responding when appropriate, but part of his mind was already in that future board meeting, imagining what he'd say, how he'd prove that he was ready. After Eli was in bed, Noah sat on the small balcony of their apartment, another luxury, outdoor space, and called a number he'd been avoiding for months. Marcus Chen answered on the third ring. Noah? Noah Grant? Hey, Marcus. There was a long pause. Marcus had been Noah's partner on the ambulance, the person he'd worked with for 5 years before everything fell apart. They'd been close once, had trusted each other with their lives on every call. But after Sarah's death, after the incident, Marcus had testified against Noah at the board hearing, had said, under oath, that he had concerns about Noah's emotional stability. I didn't think I'd hear from you, Marcus said finally. I didn't think I'd call, but I'm appealing the board's decision, and I wanted you to know. Another pause. Noah, what I said at that hearing was what you believed was true. I know. I was a mess, Marcus. I was angry and grieving and not thinking straight. You did what you thought was right. You ended your career. No, my actions ended my career. You just told the truth about what you saw. Noah leaned against the balcony railing, watching the city lights below. But I'm different now. I've had 2 years to process Sarah's death, to figure out who I am without her. I've learned to channel the anger into something productive. And I saved someone's life, Marcus. You probably saw it on the news. The billionaire at the funeral. Yeah, I saw. That was incredible, man. Really incredible. I did it because I remembered what you taught me. Trust your instincts. Don't second-guess yourself. Act decisively. All the things that made me a good paramedic, they're still there. I'm still that person, just steadier now. Marcus was quiet for so long that Noah thought he'd hung up. Then, what do you need from me? I need you to tell the board what you just heard, that I'm different, that I've grown, that you'd trust me on a scene again. Noah, I don't know if I can. I'm not asking you to lie. If you don't believe I'm ready, say so. But if you think there's even a chance that I've changed, that I could do this work again, I need you to say that. Another long pause. Then Marcus said, meet me for coffee tomorrow. Rosie's Diner, the one we used to hit after night shifts. 7 a.m. I'll be there. Noah hung up feeling lighter than he had in months. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something. A chance. The board meeting the next morning was intense. Noah presented his findings from Chicago and the 16 other facilities he'd visited over the past 3 months. He'd compiled everything into a comprehensive report that didn't pull punches. This company had prioritized profits over people, had ignored warning signs, had created environments where workers were afraid to speak up. Some board members were defensive. Others were shocked, claiming they'd had no idea conditions were so poor. Vivian sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable as Noah clicked through slides showing exposed wiring, broken equipment, overcrowded workspaces. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Vivian spoke. How much will it cost to fix everything? Noah had anticipated this question. Approximately $43 million over the next 18 months. That includes facility improvements, new equipment, expanded training programs, and hiring additional safety personnel at every location. One board member, an older man named Harrison, scoffed. $43 million? That'll decimate our quarterly profits. So will lawsuits when someone dies, Noah replied evenly. Not to mention the damage to the company's reputation, the potential criminal charges for negligence, and the simple moral fact that we're putting people at risk every single day. Moral fact? Harrison's tone was dismissive. Mr. Grant, this is business, not charity. No, Mr. Harrison, this is people's lives. And if you can't see the value in protecting them, then maybe you're on the wrong board. The room went very quiet. Noah realized, with a distant sort of horror, that he'd just insulted a board member in front of the entire executive team. But he couldn't take it back, and honestly, he didn't want to. Margaret spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. Mr. Grant is right. This company was built by my father on the principle that workers are our greatest asset. We've lost sight of that in recent years, and it's time we remembered. She looked around the table. I move that we approve Mr. Grant's full budget request and implement his recommendations immediately. All in favor? Vivian's hand went up first, then Margaret's. Then slowly, one by one, every other board member except Harrison raised their hands. Motion carries, Margaret said with satisfaction. Noah, you have your budget. Now go make sure our people are safe. After the meeting, Harrison cornered Noah in the hallway. You made me look like a fool in there. No, sir. You made yourself look like someone who values money over lives. I just pointed it out. Harrison's face reddened. You're new here, Grant. You don't understand how things work. That idealism of yours, it won't last. This company will chew you up and spit you out, just like it does everyone who tries to change it. Maybe, Noah said calmly, or maybe I'm here to change the company instead. I guess we'll find out. He walked away before Harrison could respond, his hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. He'd just made an enemy, and not a small one. Harrison had been on the board for 20 years, had connections and influence. But Noah had meant every word. He wasn't here to play politics or make friends. He was here to do a job, and he was going to do it right. At 6:45 the next morning, Noah sat in Rosie's diner nursing a cup of coffee and trying not to think about all the ways this conversation with Marcus could go wrong. The diner hadn't changed. Same cracked vinyl booths, same grease smell from the kitchen, same tired waitress who'd served them countless breakfasts after brutal night shifts. Marcus arrived right at 7, looking older than Noah remembered. There was gray at his temples now, and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago. He slid into the booth across from Noah, ordered coffee, and for a long moment they just looked at each other. You look good, Marcus said finally. Better than last time I saw you. Last time you saw me, I was being escorted out of the station by security. Yeah, Marcus winced. About that, don't apologize. I told you you did what you thought was right. Noah wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. I was a wreck, Marcus. I know that. I scared people. I scared myself. What changed? Noah thought about the question, about the long road from that dark place to here. I stopped running from the grief and let myself feel it. I got help, therapy, medication for a while. I focused on being a father instead of being a widower. And I found work that mattered, even when it was just cleaning floors. He paused. But mostly, I learned that I wasn't broken beyond repair. I was just broken in ways I hadn't figured out how to fix yet. Marcus nodded slowly. I've thought about you a lot these past 2 years. Wondered if you were okay, if you hated me. I didn't hate you. I was angry for a while, sure, but mostly I was angry at myself. Noah leaned forward. Marcus, when I stopped that funeral, when I saved Vivian Clark, it wasn't just about saving her. It was about proving to myself that I still had the instincts, the courage, the competence that made me good at this work. And I do. They're still there. They never left. I saw the videos, Marcus admitted. Everyone at the station did. You were incredible, man. The way you assessed the situation, made the call, followed through despite everyone telling you were crazy. That was the Noah I used to know. That's the Noah I still am, just with better coping mechanisms. The waitress brought their food, eggs and toast for both of them, the same breakfast they'd ordered 100 times before. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the familiarity of the routine easing the tension. Finally, Marcus set down his fork. What do you need from me? Specifically. A letter to the medical board. Tell them what you told me, that the person you testified against 2 years ago isn't the person I am now, that you've seen evidence of my continued competence, that you believe I deserve a second chance. And if they ask if I'd work with you again? Noah held his breath. This was the question that mattered, the one that would determine everything. Marcus met his eyes directly. I'd say yes. I'd say that if you get your license back, I'd be honored to be your partner again. Noah's throat closed up. He'd hoped for professional courtesy, maybe lukewarm support. He hadn't expected this. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me yet. The board can be brutal, Noah. They're going to question everything, your treatment, your current mental state, your judgment. They're going to try to find any reason to deny the appeal. I know, but I have to try. For me, for Eli. To prove that mistakes don't have to be permanent. Marcus smiled, the first real smile Noah had seen from him since he'd arrived. Then, I'll write the letter. And Noah? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything that happened, for not standing by you when you needed it. You deserved better. We all do the best we can with what we know at the time. Noah pushed his eggs around his plate. I've learned that people aren't all good or all bad. They're just trying to survive, trying to do right, and sometimes they screw up. You screwed up by not supporting me. I screwed up by not handling my grief better. but we get to keep trying. That's the gift. They talked for another hour, catching up on the past 2 years, sharing stories about calls they'd worked together, remembering Sarah, because Marcus had known her too, had been at their wedding, had held Eli when he was just days old. The memories hurt, but they also healed, reminding Noah that his life before the tragedy had been full and meaningful. When they finally left the diner, Marcus pulled Noah into a hug. Good luck with the appeal. And with the new job. Clark Industries is lucky to have you. Let's hope they still think that after I finish turning their company upside down, Marcus laughed. That's my boy. Go shake things up. Noah spent the next 4 weeks in a whirlwind of activity. He traveled to every facility, met with every manager, interviewed hundreds of workers. He implemented the new safety protocol company-wide, installed direct phone lines to his office in every break room, and personally investigated 17 complaints in the first month alone. 3 managers were fired for retaliation against employees who'd raised concerns. 2 facilities were shut down for emergency repairs. One entire production line was redesigned after Noah discovered that the original setup forced workers into repetitive motions that were causing permanent joint damage. The company magazine ran a feature on him titled, "The Man Who Stopped a Funeral and Started a Revolution." The article included photos of Noah at various facilities, talking to workers, examining equipment, making notes on his ever-present clipboard. It quoted employees calling him the first person who actually cares, and proof that the company is finally changing. Harrison hated it. He cornered Noah in the parking garage one evening, his face red with rage. "You're making us look like villains. That article makes it sound like we've been deliberately harming our workers." "Haven't you been?" Noah asked mildly, clicking his key fob to unlock his car, a used Honda he'd bought with his first paycheck. Nothing fancy, but reliable. "We've been running a business. Sometimes that means making difficult choices about resource allocation." Resource allocation is budget terminology for choosing profits over people. I'm choosing people. If that makes me unpopular with you, I can live with that. "You won't last," Harrison hissed. "Margaret and Vivian might protect you now, but eventually they'll realize you're more trouble than you're worth. And when they do, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." Noah looked at him calmly. "Mr. Harrison, 3 months ago I was cleaning toilets for minimum wage. You think threatening my career scares me? I've already lost everything once. I know how to survive it. But can you say the same? Because if this company keeps operating the way it has been, eventually someone will die. And when that happens, the board will need a scapegoat. Ask yourself who's more expendable, the man trying to prevent disaster or the man fighting against prevention." He got in his car and drove away, leaving Harrison standing in the parking garage, his expression unreadable. That night, Noah lay awake in bed thinking about the confrontation, about the enemies he was making, about how precarious his position really was. Vivian and Margaret supported him now, but Harrison was right. Eventually, the cost of his reforms would start affecting quarterly profits, and when that happened, would they still back him? His phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Heard about your run-in with Harrison. Don't worry about him. You're doing exactly what we hired you to do. Keep pushing." Noah smiled in the darkness and typed back, "Thank you. I intend to." 3 days later, his work was validated in a way he hadn't expected. He got a call from the Seattle facility, the one where a worker had lost fingers, asking him to come immediately. There had been an incident. Noah caught the next flight out, his stomach in knots the entire way. An incident could mean anything from a minor injury to a fatality. When he arrived at the facility, the manager, a woman named Sandra Liu, who'd been supportive of Noah's reforms from the start, met him at the entrance. "What happened?" Noah asked. "Come see." She led him into the warehouse where workers were gathered around a machine that had been shut down. The safety guard Noah had insisted be reinstalled was crumpled and broken, but still attached. And standing beside it was a young man, maybe 23, his face pale but intact. "This is Miguel," Sandra said. "Tell Mr. Grant what happened." Miguel swallowed hard. "I was running the press like normal, but something felt off, so I called for maintenance like the new protocol says. While I was waiting, the hydraulic line burst. If the safety guard hadn't been there," he gestured to the twisted metal, "that would have been my head, Noah looked at the crushed guard, calculating the force it had taken to destroy it, the force that would have killed this young man instantly. You followed protocol. You trusted your instincts. You did everything right. Because you taught us to, Miguel said, his voice shaking. 3 months ago, I would have kept running the machine, would have been too scared to stop production, too worried about getting fired. But you said to always call if something feels wrong, so I did, and you saved my life without even being here. Sandra touched Noah's arm. This is why we're doing this. This is why the reforms matter. Miguel gets to go home to his family tonight because you refused to accept how things were. Noah couldn't speak for a moment, emotion clogging his throat. This was it, the tangible proof that his work wasn't just paperwork and policy changes. It was lives, real lives, preserved because someone had been willing to fight for them. Thank you for calling me, he finally managed. And Miguel, you're a hero too. You stopped working when you knew something was wrong, even though it probably felt safer to just keep going. That takes courage. The story spread through the company like wildfire. By the time Noah flew back that evening, his email was flooded with messages from workers at other facilities sharing their own stories. Near misses prevented by the new protocols, hazards identified and fixed, injuries avoided. The reforms were working. At the next board meeting, even Harrison was silent as Vivian presented the data. Worker injuries were down 42% in just 3 months. Production efficiency had actually increased because workers felt safer and more valued. And the company's reputation was improving. Articles in business journals were praising Clark Industries for putting people first and revolutionizing workplace safety. Mr. Grant, Margaret said at the end of the presentation, you've exceeded every expectation we had. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your vision and your courage. The board members applauded, all except Harrison, who simply nodded curtly and left the room as soon as the meeting adjourned. Don't worry about him, Vivian said afterward, catching Noah in the hallway. He'll come around or he'll leave. Either way, you're doing incredible work. I'm just doing what should have been done years ago. Exactly, that's what makes it incredible. She paused, then added, How's Eli? I keep meaning to have you both over for dinner, but things have been chaotic. He's great. Thriving at Riverside Academy. He talks about his science projects constantly. Bring him by this Saturday. I have a niece about his age, Margaret's granddaughter, Emily. I think they'd get along, and I'd like to get to know the boy who helped you storm my funeral. Noah smiled. He'd love that. Thank you. Saturday arrived clear and cool, the kind of autumn day that made everything feel possible. Noah and Eli drove to Vivian's estate, and estate was the only word for it. A sprawling property with gardens and a fountain and a house that looked like something from a movie. Eli's eyes were wide as they pulled up the circular driveway. She lives here? Just her? Well, she has staff, Noah said, trying not to feel intimidated himself. But yeah, this is her home. Vivian met them at the door, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, her smile warm. Noah, Eli, welcome. Come in, please. The interior was beautiful, but not ostentatious. Hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, art on the walls that looked original but wasn't showy. It felt like a home, not a museum. Emily appeared from the kitchen, a girl of about 8 with dark curls and curious eyes. Hi, are you Eli? Grandma Maggie said you like science. I love science. Do you want to see my rock collection? Eli looked at Noah for permission, and when Noah nodded, the 2 children disappeared upstairs, already chattering about minerals and crystals. Vivian led Noah to a sunroom overlooking the garden. They'll be occupied for hours. Emily loves having someone to talk to about her interests. Most kids her age think rocks are boring. They sat in comfortable chairs, and a woman appeared with tea and cookies, setting them on the table between them before disappearing again. How are you really? Vivian asked, pouring tea for both of them. And I don't mean professionally. I mean you, Noah. How are you holding up? The question caught him off guard. People asked him about work constantly, about Eli, about his plans. No one asked about him. I'm okay, he said automatically, then caught himself. Actually, that's not entirely true. I'm better than okay in some ways. The job is fulfilling, Eli's happy, we have stability. But I'm also exhausted. The work is harder than I expected, not physically, but emotionally. Every facility I visit, I see things that make me angry. Things that should have been fixed, people who were hurt or could have been hurt. And I keep wondering if I'm doing enough. Vivian nodded slowly. I understand that. After Richard tried to kill me, after I woke up and realized how close I'd come to dying, I became obsessed with control. I wanted to micromanage every aspect of the company, every decision, every detail. I nearly drove Margaret and the board insane. What changed? I realized I was trying to control everything because I couldn't control the one thing that mattered, what had already happened to me. And I was burning myself out in the process. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. You can't save everyone, Noah. You can't fix every problem. All you can do is show up every day and do the best you can with what you have. That has to be enough, or you'll destroy yourself trying. But what if my best isn't enough? What if someone gets hurt because I missed something? Then you learn from it and do better next time. But you can't live in fear of failure. That's not living at all. They talked for hours about work and loss and recovery and second chances. Vivian shared stories about rebuilding her life after the funeral, about the nightmares she still had sometimes, about the therapy she'd started and how it was helping. Noah shared his fears about the medical board hearing, about whether he was ready to be a paramedic again, about whether he deserved the chance. You deserve it, Vivian said firmly. Not because you saved me, though that certainly proves your competence, but because you've done the work to heal, to grow, to become someone who can handle the responsibility. That's what second chances are for. Not for people who are perfect, but for people who are willing to try. When the children finally emerged, covered in dirt from exploring the garden, both adults smiled at their enthusiasm. Dad, Emily has a greenhouse with actual growing vegetables. Can we have a greenhouse? Our apartment balcony is about 6 feet wide, buddy. I don't think a greenhouse will fit. But we could grow something, Eli insisted. Emily says tomatoes are easy. Then we'll get a tomato plant for the balcony. Deal? Deal! As they were leaving, Vivian pulled Noah aside. The board hearing is in 2 weeks, right? Yes, I'm terrified. Don't be. You're ready. And Noah, whatever happens, you have a place here. This job, this community, this family. She gestured to Emily and Margaret, who'd appeared to say goodbye. We're yours now. You saved my life, but you also saved something in yourself. Remember that. The 2 weeks before the hearing crawled by. Noah prepared obsessively, reviewing every aspect of his case, practicing answers to potential questions, gathering every piece of evidence that proved his competence and stability. Mr. Peterson assured him they had a strong case, but Noah couldn't shake his anxiety. The night before the hearing, he lay in bed, unable to sleep. Eli appeared in his doorway, backlit by the hallway light. Dad, you okay? Can't sleep, buddy. Too much on my mind. Eli padded into the room and climbed into bed beside him, just like he used to when he was younger and scared of the dark. It's going to be okay. You're going to get your license back. How do you know? Because you're the bravest person I know, and because you saved Mrs. Clark, and if you can save her, you can do anything. Noah wrapped his arm around his son, pulling him close. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. They fell asleep like that, father and son, facing the unknown together, but not alone. And in the morning, Noah woke with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Whatever happened at the hearing, he'd be okay. Because he had Eli, and he had work that mattered, and he had proof, tangible, undeniable proof, that he was capable of making a difference. The rest would work itself out. It always did, for people brave enough to keep trying. The medical board hearing room was smaller than Noah had imagined, more intimate, and somehow more intimidating because of it. Gray carpet, fluorescent lighting, a long table where 5 board members sat with folders spread before them like judgment rendered in paper form. Noah took his seat across from them, Mr. Peterson beside him radiating professional confidence that Noah wished he could borrow. Dr. Ellen Reeves, the board chair, adjusted her glasses and looked at Noah with an expression that gave nothing away. She was perhaps 60, her hair silver, her demeanor clinical. Mr. Grant, thank you for appearing today. This hearing will determine whether your paramedic license, revoked 2 years ago due to behavioral concerns, should be reinstated. You'll have the opportunity to present your case, and we'll hear from witnesses both supporting and opposing your reinstatement. Do you understand the proceedings? Yes, ma'am, Noah said, his voice steadier than he felt. Then let's begin. Mr. Peterson, you may present your opening statement. Peterson stood, his posture relaxed but commanding. Thank you, Dr. Reeves. Members of the board, we're here today because 2 years ago, you made a decision based on limited information about a man in crisis. Noah Grant lost his wife suddenly and traumatically. In his grief, he acted in ways that concerned his colleagues and superiors. But grief is not permanent incompetence. Pain is not proof of inability. And time, therapy, and tremendous personal growth have transformed Mr. Grant from a man in crisis to a man who recently saved a life under extraordinary circumstances, demonstrating the exact skills and judgment you questioned. He clicked a remote, and the screen behind them lit up with news footage from the funeral. Noah watched himself on screen, pushing through the crowd, dropping to his knees beside Vivian's casket, his voice desperate but certain. She's not dead. Her pulse is faint, but it's there. The board members watched in silence as the video showed Vivian's eyes opening, her chest moving, the moment impossible odds bent in favor of life. Peterson let the footage speak for itself, then continued. Mr. Grant didn't just save Mrs. Clark's life. He diagnosed a condition most medical professionals would have missed, administered treatment under pressure, and followed through despite universal opposition. That's not the behavior of someone unfit for medical work. That's the behavior of someone exceptional. He sat down, and Dr. Reeves nodded. Mr. Grant, would you like to address the board? Noah stood, his legs feeling unsteady but holding. He'd rehearsed this moment 100 times, but now all his prepared words evaporated. So he spoke from the heart instead. 2 years ago, I watched my wife die in my arms. She was everything to me, my partner, my best friend, the mother of my son. And when she died, something in me broke. Not my skills, not my knowledge, not my instincts, but my ability to accept that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you can't save everyone. He paused, looking at each board member in turn. I performed CPR on her for over 40 minutes because I couldn't accept that she was gone. When other paramedics tried to take over, I fought them. I was violent, irrational, consumed by grief. And you revoked my license because of it. Dr. Reeves' expression remained neutral, but Noah thought he saw something soften in her eyes. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that you were wrong, Noah continued. In that moment, I was unstable. I was a danger to myself and potentially others. But grief isn't a permanent condition. With therapy, time, and hard work, I learned to carry my loss without letting it control me. I learned that I can honor Sarah's memory by living well, not by destroying myself. He took a breath, feeling the weight of every word. 3 months ago, I was working as a janitor, barely making ends meet, trying to give my son a life worth living. Then I overheard a conversation about a woman being poisoned, and I had a choice. I could ignore it, keep my head down, stay safe. Or I could trust my training, my instincts, my ability to make a difference. And I chose to act, not because I was reckless or desperate for redemption, but because I knew I was right, and I knew someone would die if I didn't speak up. The room was utterly silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. I'm asking for my license back not because I need it for my current job. I have meaningful work at Clark Industries that I love. I'm asking for it because you took something from me that defined who I was, and I want to prove that I'm still that person. I want to prove that mistakes don't have to be permanent, that people can heal and grow and become trustworthy again. And mostly, I want my son to see that when life knocks you down, you get back up. You don't stay down. You keep fighting. Noah sat down, his hands trembling slightly. Peterson squeezed his shoulder briefly, a gesture of support. Dr. Reeves made notes on her pad, then said, "We'll now hear from witnesses. First, we have Dr. James Mitchell, the psychiatrist who conducted Mr. Grant's evaluation." Dr. Mitchell was young for a psychiatrist, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He took the witness seat and spoke clearly. I've evaluated hundreds of emergency services personnel over my career. Many have PTSD, anxiety, depression, all normal responses to traumatic work. Mr. Grant came to me with a history of acute grief reaction, which is a normal, if intense, response to sudden loss. Over 6 months of therapy, he demonstrated remarkable insight into his behavior, developed healthy coping mechanisms, and showed no signs of impaired judgment or emotional instability. One of the board members, a stern-looking man named Dr. Kowalski, leaned forward. Dr. Mitchell, normal people don't physically fight their colleagues at a death scene. Normal people don't watch their spouse die unexpectedly, Dr. Mitchell replied calmly. Mr. Grant's response was extreme, yes, but it was situational and time-limited. He hasn't displayed similar behavior before or since. That's textbook acute stress reaction, not chronic instability. The questions continued for 20 minutes. Dr. Mitchell held firm on every point. Noah was mentally sound, emotionally stable, and fully capable of performing medical duties. Next came Marcus Chen, looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed too formal for him. He took the seat and faced the board with the same straightforward honesty he'd always brought to his work. I was Mr. Grant's partner for 5 years, Marcus began. I trusted him with my life on every call. And when his wife died, I watched him fall apart. At the hearing 2 years ago, I testified that I had concerns about his stability. I stand by that testimony. At that time, those concerns were valid. Noah's heart sank. This wasn't the support Peterson had promised, but Marcus wasn't finished. However, people change. Growth is real. And the man sitting here today is not the same man I testified against 2 years ago. I've seen the video of him saving Mrs. Clark. I've spoken with him at length about his recovery and his current mental state. And I can say without hesitation that if Noah Grant gets his license back, I would be honored to work with him again. He's always been one of the best paramedics I've known. He just needed time to heal. Dr. Reeves made more notes. And you're confident in that assessment? You'd trust him in high-pressure emergency situations? Completely. The funeral proves it. He assessed an impossible situation, made a correct diagnosis against all conventional wisdom, and executed treatment flawlessly under tremendous pressure. That's not just competence, that's excellence. The next hour brought more witnesses. Mrs. Hammond from Riverside Academy spoke about Noah's character and parenting. Father Matthews testified about Noah's community involvement and personal growth. Even Sandra Liu, the manager from Seattle, appeared via video conference to describe how Noah's safety protocols had saved Miguel's life. Then came the opposition. Dr. Reeves called forward Dr. Patricia Nguyen, the emergency department chief who'd filed the initial complaint against Noah 2 years ago. Dr. Nguyen was a formidable presence, her expression severe. Dr. Reeves, members of the board, I filed that complaint because Mr. Grant posed a danger to himself and others. He became violent at a death scene. He refused direct orders from senior paramedics. He had to be physically restrained by multiple people. Those aren't the actions of someone who should be trusted with patients' lives. Have you reviewed the evidence of Mr. Grant's recent actions? Peterson asked. I have. And while I acknowledge that saving Mrs. Clark was impressive, one good deed doesn't erase a pattern of concerning behavior. What pattern? Peterson pressed. Can you cite any other instances of Mr. Grant displaying violence or poor judgment? Dr. Nguyen hesitated. Well, there were complaints about his attitude, his questioning of protocols. Questioning protocols isn't violence. It's critical thinking. And his attitude consisted of advocating for patients and challenging decisions he believed were wrong. Is that really grounds for permanent license revocation? When combined with the death scene incident, which occurred during the worst moment of his life and has never been repeated, Dr. Nguyen, with respect, it seems like you're holding Mr. Grant to an impossible standard. We don't require medical professionals to be perfect. We require them to be competent and safe. By every objective measure, Mr. Grant meets both criteria. The exchange continued, growing heated at points, but Peterson systematically dismantled Dr. Nguyen's arguments. By the time she stepped down, her opposition seemed based more on rigid principle than actual evidence. The final witness surprised Noah. Vivian Clark entered the hearing room dressed in a sharp business suit, her presence commanding immediate attention. She took the witness seat with the same confidence she brought to boardrooms. Mrs. Clark, Dr. Reeves said, thank you for coming. We understand you have a unique perspective on Mr. Grant's capabilities. I do. He saved my life. Vivian's voice was clear, unwavering. My husband poisoned me with a compound designed to mimic death. I was going to be buried alive. 53 people attended my funeral, doctors, friends, business associates, and not one of them questioned my death. Not one noticed anything wrong. But Mr. Grant, a janitor working in my building who'd simply overheard a conversation, saw what everyone else missed. She leaned forward slightly, her intensity filling the room. I was conscious during my funeral, trapped in my own body, unable to move or speak, listening to people mourn me while knowing I was about to be buried alive. And then I heard his voice, so certain, so desperate. "She's not dead." In that moment, he was my only hope, and he didn't fail me. Dr. Kowalski spoke up. "Mrs. Clark, we appreciate your testimony, but emotional gratitude isn't the same as professional assessment. Can you speak to Mr. Grant's actual medical competence?" Vivian's expression hardened. "I'm not here because of emotional gratitude. I'm here because I'm now the CEO of a $3 billion company, and I hired Mr. Grant to overhaul our safety systems. In 3 months, he's reduced workplace injuries by 42%, prevented at least one fatality that we know of, and transformed our company culture. That's not luck. That's skill, judgment, and expertise." She looked directly at Dr. Nguyen. "You say one good deed doesn't erase past behavior. But what about 3 months of consistently excellent judgment? What about a track record of making life-saving decisions? At what point does redemption count for something?" The room fell silent. Vivian stood, smoothing her suit jacket. "This board has the power to restore what you took from a good man during his darkest moment. I hope you choose wisely." She nodded to Noah, then walked out, leaving her words hanging in the air like a challenge. "Doctor." Reeves called for a recess, and the board members filed out to deliberate. Noah sat in the hallway with Peterson, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. "How did I do?" Noah asked. "You were honest, articulate, and compelling. The witnesses were strong. Vivian was incredible. I've never seen anyone command a room like that." Peterson smiled slightly. "But ultimately, it's out of our hands now. The board will deliberate for at least an hour, possibly more. We just have to wait." The hour stretched into 2. Noah paced the hallway, checked his phone obsessively, tried to read messages from Eli and Vivian wishing him luck, but couldn't focus on the words. Marcus appeared at some point, sitting beside him in solidarity, neither of them speaking because there was nothing left to say. Finally, after 2 hours and 17 minutes, the hearing room doors opened. Dr. Reeves stood in the doorway. "Mr. Grant, we're ready." Noah's legs felt like water as he walked back into the room. The board members were seated again, their expressions unreadable. Dr. Reeves had a single sheet of paper before her, and she looked at it rather than at Noah as she spoke. "Mr. Grant, this board has carefully considered all testimony and evidence presented today. We've reviewed your history, your recent actions, and the assessments of multiple medical and professional experts. We've also examined the circumstances under which your license was revoked and whether that decision was proportionate to your actions." She paused, and Noah's heart hammered so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "It's the unanimous decision of this board that your paramedic license should be reinstated, effective immediately, with one condition. You will undergo quarterly psychological evaluations for the next year to ensure continued stability. If at any point those evaluations raise concerns, we reserve the right to review this decision. Do you accept these terms?" Noah couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only process the words "license should be reinstated" echoing in his mind like a miracle he'd stopped believing in. "Mr. Grant?" Dr. Reeves prompted gently. "Yes," he managed, his voice breaking. "Yes, I accept. Thank you so much." Dr. Reeves allowed herself a small smile. "You did the work, Mr. Grant. You earned this. Use it wisely." Peterson was shaking his hand, Marcus was hugging him, and Noah was crying without quite meaning to, tears of relief and joy and vindication streaming down his face. 2 years. 2 years of believing he'd never be whole again, and now, in this small gray room with fluorescent lights, he was being given back a piece of himself he'd thought was lost forever. Outside the building, Noah called Eli immediately. The phone rang twice before his son answered, breathless. "Dad, did you get it?" I got it, buddy. I got my license back. Eli screamed so loudly that Noah had to hold the phone away from his ear. In the background, he heard children cheering. Eli must have been at school, must have told his friends about the hearing. I knew it! I knew you would! Everyone said you would! Mrs. Peterson said we could have a party if you won. Tell Mrs. Peterson that sounds perfect. Noah was smiling so hard his face hurt. I'll pick you up at the normal time, okay? And buddy, thank you for believing in me. Always, Dad. Always. He called Vivian next, who answered on the first ring. Well? I got it. Of course you did. Noah, I'm so proud of you, not just for winning, but for having the courage to fight. Her voice softened. What you said in there about proving that mistakes don't have to be permanent, that resonated with me more than you know. After everything with Richard, I've struggled with trusting people again, but you remind me that people can be good, can be trustworthy, can do the right thing even when it's hard. Thank you for that. Thank you for showing up. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. You saved my life, Noah. The least I could do was help save yours. That evening, Noah took Eli out for dinner. Nothing fancy, just their favorite pizza place. But it felt celebratory. They sat in a booth by the window and Eli couldn't stop grinning. So what does this mean? Eli asked, pulling cheese off his slice. Are you going to be a paramedic again? I don't know, Noah admitted. I love my work at Clark Industries. I'm making a real difference there. But having my license back means I have options. It means I proved something important, that I'm still who I was before everything fell apart. That matters. Mom would be proud, Eli said quietly. Noah's throat tightened. Yeah, buddy, I think she would be. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the restaurant bustling around them with other families, other lives intersecting briefly in this shared space. Noah watched his son, this brave, resilient kid who'd survived so much and was thriving now, and felt a gratitude so profound it was almost painful. Dad? Eli said suddenly. Can I ask you something? Always. Are you going to marry Mrs. Clark? Noah nearly choked on his pizza. What? No, Eli, where did that come from? Eli shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. Emily said her Aunt Vivian really likes you, and you like her, and you're both single, so I thought maybe… Mrs. Clark is my boss and my friend, that's all. Noah tried to keep his voice gentle. I know you miss having a mom, and I understand why you'd hope for that. But buddy, I'm not looking to get married again. I'm focused on being your dad and doing my job well. But you're not sad anymore. Not like you used to be. No, I'm not. But not being sad doesn't mean I'm ready for a new relationship. It just means I'm healing. There's a difference. Eli nodded, accepting this. Okay, but if you ever did want to date someone, Mrs. Clark would be pretty cool. Noah laughed despite himself. I'll keep that in mind. The weekend brought an unexpected visitor. Noah answered a knock on his apartment door Saturday morning to find Margaret Clark standing in the hallway, leaning on her cane, looking slightly out of place in her elegant clothes against the backdrop of their modest building. Mrs. Clark, Noah said, surprised. Please, come in. Margaret entered, her sharp eyes taking in the apartment. The simple furniture, the clean but worn carpet, Eli's drawings on the refrigerator. You've made this quite homey. It's not much, but it's ours. Noah gestured to the sofa. Can I get you coffee? Tea? Coffee would be lovely. Margaret sat carefully, arranging her cane beside her. I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to speak with you about something important. Noah made coffee while anxiety churned in his stomach. Important conversations with board members rarely meant good things. He brought 2 mugs to the living room and sat across from her. Margaret sipped her coffee, then set it down with deliberate care. Noah, I've been on the board of Clark Industries for 43 years. I helped my father build that company from a single factory into what it is today. And in all those years, I've seen hundreds of employees come and go. Most are competent, some are exceptional. Very few change the fundamental nature of the company. She looked at him directly. You're one of the few. In just 3 months, you've transformed how we think about our workers, how we prioritize safety, how we measure success. The cultural shift you've created is remarkable. Thank you, Noah said cautiously, but I sense there's more you want to say. Perceptive, Margaret smiled slightly. Harrison resigned from the board yesterday. He sent a letter claiming philosophical differences with the company's new direction. The truth is, he couldn't accept that profits aren't the only measure of success. Noah's eyebrows rose. He resigned? With significant financial incentive to go quietly, but his departure leaves an open board seat, and Vivian and I have been discussing who should fill it. She paused. We'd like it to be you. Noah stared at her. Me? On the board? Mrs. Clark, I've only been here 3 months. And you've accomplished more in 3 months than most board members do in years. Noah, we need your voice at the highest level of decision-making. We need someone who understands what it means to struggle, who fights for people rather than just profits, who isn't afraid to challenge convention. She leaned forward. You saved Vivian's life because you saw what no one else could see. We need that vision guiding our company. I don't have business experience. I don't understand corporate finance or... You can learn those things. What we can't teach is integrity, courage, and genuine care for human welfare. You have all three in abundance. Noah stood and walked to the window, looking out over the parking lot where his used Honda sat among other modest vehicles. A board seat at Clark Industries. It was absurd, impossible, completely beyond anything he'd imagined. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. But Noah, don't dismiss this because you think you're not qualified. You're more qualified than most of the people who've held that seat. You just measure qualifications differently than the business world typically does. After Margaret left, Noah sat on the sofa for a long time, thinking. A board seat meant power, influence, the ability to shape company policy at the highest level. It also meant more responsibility, more scrutiny, more pressure. Was he ready for that? His phone rang. Vivian. Margaret told me she visited you. She offered me Harrison's board seat. What did you say? That I'd think about it. Noah rubbed his face. Vivian, I'm a janitor who got lucky. I don't belong on a corporate board. You're a former paramedic who saved my life and transformed our company. You absolutely belong on that board. But Noah, I want you to understand something. This isn't charity or gratitude. We're offering this because we genuinely believe you'll make us better. Your perspective, your values, your willingness to fight for what's right. That's exactly what corporate boards need and rarely have. What if I fail? What if I make decisions that hurt the company? Then you'll learn and do better, just like everyone else. Noah, stop punishing yourself for not being perfect. None of us are. We just try our best and hope it's enough. After hanging up, Noah went to Eli's room, where the boy was building something with Legos, his concentration absolute. Hey, buddy, can I ask your opinion about something? Eli looked up. Sure. Mrs. Clark, Margaret, the older one, she offered me a position on the company board. It's a big promotion, a lot more responsibility. I'm not sure if I should take it. Do you want to take it? Part of me does, but another part is scared I'll mess it up. Eli set down his Legos and came to sit beside Noah on the bed. For a 7-year-old, he sometimes seemed impossibly wise. Dad, you taught me that being scared doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. It just means it matters to you. So if you're scared about the board thing, maybe that means it's important and you should do it. Noah pulled his son into a hug. How did you get so smart? I have a good teacher. That night, Noah called Peterson to discuss the board offer from a legal perspective. The lawyer was enthusiastic, explaining the financial benefits, the prestige, the opportunities it would create. Then Noah called Marcus, who laughed. Man, from janitor to board member in 3 months. That's got to be some kind of record. It feels surreal. It feels like exactly what you deserve. Take it, Noah. Show those corporate types how it's done. Finally, late that night, Noah did something he hadn't done since Sarah's death. He pulled out the box of her belongings. Not the medical equipment, but the personal items. Her favorite sweater that still somehow carried her scent. The journal she'd kept. Photos from their wedding, their honeymoon, the day Eli was born. He opened her journal to a random page and read, Noah doubts himself too much. He's brilliant and capable, but he can't see it. I wish he could see himself the way I see him. Someone who changes lives just by showing up, who makes the world better, just by being in it. I hope someday he believes in himself as much as I believe in him. Noah closed the journal, tears streaming down his face. I'm trying, Sarah, he whispered. "I'm really trying to be the person you believed I could be." On Monday morning, Noah walked into Vivian's office with his decision made. She looked up from her computer, her expression expectant. "I'll take the board seat," Noah said, "on one condition." "Name it." "I keep my current position too. I don't want to be just a board member making decisions from a distance. I want to stay connected to the actual work, to the people I'm fighting for." "Can I do both?" Vivian smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. Yes, you can do both. In fact, I think having a board member who's actively working in the field will give us invaluable perspective." She stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to the board, Noah. I think this is the beginning of something extraordinary." The official announcement came that Wednesday. The company magazine ran another feature, this one titled, "From Janitor to Board Member, The Extraordinary Journey of Noah Grant." It included photos spanning his 3 months at the company, Noah at facilities, talking to workers, examining equipment, and finally, sitting at the board table in his first official meeting. The response was overwhelming. Employees sent emails and stopped him in hallways to congratulate him. Media outlets requested interviews, most of which Noah declined, preferring to let his work speak for itself. But he agreed to one, a human interest piece for a national magazine about second chances and redemption. The interview took place at Riverside Cemetery, standing near the spot where Vivian's funeral had been held. The journalist, a woman named Sarah Chen, asked thoughtful questions about his journey. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "The funeral? The moment you decided to speak up?" Noah looked at the spot where the golden casket had sat, where he'd knelt in the mud and fought for a stranger's life. "Every day. It was the moment everything changed. But it wasn't just about saving Mrs. Clark. It was about trusting myself again, believing that I still had value, that my instincts and training and experience still mattered." "You risked everything, your reputation, your freedom, your son's welfare. Was it worth it?" "Absolutely. Because the alternative was living with the knowledge that I could have saved someone and chose not to. I couldn't do that. Not again." He paused. "When my wife died, I couldn't save her. And for 2 years, I carried that failure like a weight around my neck. But saving Vivian showed me that I couldn't save Sarah, not because I wasn't good enough, but because sometimes loss is inevitable. And the only thing we can control is whether we show up for the people we can save." The article ran 2 weeks later with a photo of Noah at the cemetery, the city skyline behind him, his expression thoughtful. The headline read, "The hero who stopped a burial and started a revolution." Life settled into a new rhythm. Noah balanced board meetings with facility visits, strategic planning with hands-on safety work. Eli continued thriving at Riverside Academy, making friends and excelling in his classes. The quarterly psychological evaluation came back clear, and Noah's therapist noted his remarkable emotional stability and growth. 6 months after the funeral, Noah organized a company-wide safety conference, bringing together workers from all 17 facilities to share best practices and concerns. It was the first time hourly workers had been given equal platform with management, and the results were transformative. Dozens of safety improvements were suggested, many implemented within weeks. At the closing session, a worker from the Seattle facility, Miguel, the young man whose life had been saved by the safety protocols, asked to speak. He took the microphone with shaking hands. "I just want to say thank you to Mr. Grant. 6 months ago, I would have died at my job because I was too scared to stop working when something felt wrong. But he taught us that our lives matter more than production quotas, that speaking up isn't weakness, it's courage. And because of him, I got to go home to my family. My daughter's first birthday was last week, and I was there because Mr. Grant refused to accept that workers are disposable." His voice broke. "We're not disposable. And finally, someone in power believes that." The applause was deafening. Noah stood in the back of the room, overwhelmed by the response, by the tangible proof that his work was saving lives in ways both dramatic and subtle. That evening, Vivian hosted a small dinner party at her estate. Just Noah, Eli, Margaret, Emily, and a few close friends. They ate in the garden as the sun set, the conversation easy and warm. Emily and Eli disappeared to explore the greenhouse, and Margaret regaled everyone with stories from the company's early days. At one point, Vivian pulled Noah aside, the two of them standing near the fountain as water cascaded in the golden light. "I've been thinking about that day at the cemetery," she said quietly, "about how you stopped my funeral. And I realized something. You didn't just save my life. You showed me what courage looks like. Real courage, the kind that acts despite fear, that speaks up when silence would be easier." "You showed me courage too," Noah replied. "Hiring me, supporting my reforms, standing up to the board when they pushed back. That took just as much bravery." "Maybe we saved each other," Vivian suggested with a small smile. "Maybe we did." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Noah thought about how far he'd come in 6 months, from a janitor scrubbing floors to a board member shaping company policy. From a broken man convinced he'd never matter again to someone who mattered more than he'd ever imagined possible. Later that night, after Eli was asleep, Noah sat on their apartment balcony with the tomato plant they'd gotten growing in a pot beside him. He pulled out his phone and opened his photos, scrolling to the pictures of Sarah. Her smile, her eyes, the way she'd looked at him like he was capable of anything. "I did it, Sarah," he whispered to the night. "I got my license back. I'm on the board. Eli's happy and thriving. We're okay. We're more than okay." The breeze stirred the tomato plant's leaves, and somewhere in the building someone laughed. Life continued, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Noah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Emergency services reunion next month. You should come. People would love to see you." He stared at the message for a long moment. A year ago, he would have declined, too afraid of facing his former colleagues, too ashamed of what he'd lost. But he wasn't that person anymore. "I'll be there," he typed back. 3 weeks later, Noah walked into the fire station where he'd worked for 8 years. The place looked the same: worn furniture, walls covered in commendations and photos, the smell of coffee perpetually in the air. But he felt different, whole in a way he hadn't been the last time he'd stood here. His former colleagues greeted him with genuine warmth. They asked about Eli, about his job at Clark Industries, about saving Vivian Clark. No one mentioned the incident that had ended his career. Instead, they treated him like the professional he'd always been, the partner they'd trusted. The station chief, a grizzled veteran named Tom Rodriguez, pulled Noah aside near the end of the evening. "I heard you got your license back." "I did, 2 months ago." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "You were one of the best we had, Grant. What happened with your wife? That was a tragedy, and the way we handled it wasn't right. You deserved support, not punishment. I'm glad you fought your way back." "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." "You thinking about coming back? We could use someone with your experience." Noah considered the question. A few months ago, he might have jumped at the offer, desperate to reclaim his old life. But now he understood that you couldn't go backward. You could only move forward, taking the lessons from the past, but building something new. "I appreciate the offer," Noah said finally, "but I think I'm where I need to be. Clark Industries gives me the chance to save lives in a different way, preventing emergencies rather than just responding to them. It's the right fit for who I am now." Rodriguez smiled. "Good for you, but if you ever change your mind, the door's open." As Noah drove home that night, he felt a sense of closure he hadn't known he needed. He'd proven to himself and everyone else that he was still capable, still valuable, still the person he'd been before tragedy struck. But more importantly, he'd proven that he could be someone new, someone shaped by loss but not defined by it, someone who'd taken broken pieces and built something meaningful. 1 year after stopping the funeral, Noah stood in the same cemetery on a crisp autumn morning. This time, he wasn't alone. Eli was beside him, and so were Vivian, Margaret, Emily, Marcus, and a dozen other people whose lives had intersected with his in meaningful ways. They'd come to dedicate a bench near where Vivian's funeral had been held. The plaque read, "In memory of those who speak up when silence seems safer, in honor of courage that saves lives." Vivian spoke first, her voice carrying across the quiet cemetery. "A year ago, I was nearly buried in this ground because someone chose greed over life. But I survived because one person refused to accept the convenient truth. One person trusted his instincts, risked everything, and saved not just my life but gave me the chance to live better, to do better, to be better. This bench represents that moment, the moment when courage mattered more than fear. She turned to Noah. Would you like to say something? Noah stepped forward, looking at the faces gathered around him. These people, his family, chosen and given, represented everything he'd fought for. A year ago, I was just trying to survive. I'd lost so much, and I didn't see any way forward except to keep my head down and get through each day. But that day at the funeral, something in me refused to stay silent. Maybe it was stubbornness or training or just the knowledge that I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. He looked at Eli, who was watching him with pride shining in his young eyes. My son told me once that being scared doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. It just means it matters. I was scared that day, terrified actually, but I did it anyway, because sometimes the right thing is also the hardest thing. And what I learned is that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite fear. It's trusting yourself when no one else does. It's refusing to let the world stay broken when you have the power to fix even one small piece of it. He placed his hand on the bench, feeling the cool metal under his palm. This bench represents second chances. For me, for Vivian, for everyone who's ever been told they're not enough. It represents the truth that our worst moments don't have to define us, that we can heal, grow, and become people who make a difference. That's not just my story. It's all of our stories, if we're brave enough to live it. After the ceremony, as people mingled and shared memories, Eli pulled Noah aside. Dad, I'm really proud of you. I'm proud of you too, buddy. You've been so brave through all of this. The moves, the new school, all the changes. You've handled it better than most adults would. I learned from you. You taught me that hard things don't have to break us. They can make us stronger if we let them. Noah hugged his son tightly, this incredible kid who'd taught him just as much as he'd taught Eli. Your mom would be so proud of you, of both of us. I know, I think she's watching, don't you? Yeah, buddy, I think she is. As the gathering dispersed, Noah found himself standing alone at the bench for a moment. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the loss, the struggle, the moment of desperate courage that had changed everything. He thought about Sarah and how she'd always believed in him, even when he couldn't believe in himself. And he thought about the future, spread out before him like an open road full of possibility. His phone buzzed with an email. The subject line made him catch his breath. Emergency Services Training Institute, faculty position. He opened it, reading quickly. They wanted him to teach, to train the next generation of paramedics. The position would allow him to keep his board seat and his work at Clark Industries, but add teaching to his responsibilities. It was another chance to save lives, this time by sharing everything he'd learned. Noah smiled. 6 months ago, he would have been afraid to take on more, worried about failing, convinced he wasn't qualified. But now, he understood that qualification wasn't just about credentials. It was about experience, wisdom, and the willingness to keep growing. He typed a response. I'm very interested. When can we discuss details? That evening, Noah made dinner while Eli did homework at the kitchen table. The apartment was warm, filled with the smell of cooking and the sound of Eli humming tunelessly. Outside the window, the city lights were beginning to sparkle as dusk settled. Dad? Eli asked without looking up from his math homework. Do you think we'll always live here? Probably not always. Why? Just wondering. This place is good, but sometimes I think about having a house. With a yard. Maybe a dog. Noah flipped the chicken in the pan, considering. They could afford a house now with his salary and board stipends. A yard wasn't impossible. A dog seemed reasonable. You know what? Let's start looking. This weekend we'll check out some houses, see what's out there. Eli's head shot up, his eyes wide. Really? A real house? A real house. With a yard for that dog you've been hinting about for months. Eli whooped and ran to hug Noah, nearly knocking him into the stove. This is the best day ever. It's just an idea right now, buddy. We have to find the right place, make sure we can afford it, all of that. But we're going to try. That's what matters. Later, after Eli was asleep, Noah sat at his laptop browsing real estate listings. He found himself drawn to modest houses in good neighborhoods with solid schools nearby. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth. Just safe, warm places where a father and son could build a life. One listing caught his eye. A 3-bedroom house with a fenced yard, a garage that could hold his car, and maybe a workshop someday, and a front porch perfect for sitting on summer evenings. The price was manageable, the neighborhood was good, and something about the photos felt like home. He saved the listing to show Eli tomorrow. 6 weeks later, Noah signed the papers on that house. It needed work. The kitchen was outdated, the bathroom fixtures were ancient, and the yard was overgrown. But it was theirs. On moving day, their friends showed up to help. Vivian and Margaret arrived with lunch for everyone. Marcus brought his truck to haul furniture. Even Mrs. Chen from their old building came to help unpack dishes and tell everyone stories about what good neighbors they'd been. Eli ran through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing, claiming the bedroom with the window seat overlooking the backyard. "This is where I'm going to read," he announced. "And we can put my desk here and my bookshelf there, and, Dad, can we paint it blue?" "We can paint it any color you want, buddy." That first night in the new house, they ate pizza on the floor of the living room because the furniture wasn't fully arranged yet. Eli talked nonstop about decorating his room, about the tree in the backyard that would be perfect for climbing, about how he wanted to name their future dog Thunder. "Thunder?" Noah asked, amused. "That's a big name. He's going to be a big dog, a brave dog, like us." After Eli went to bed, Noah stood on the front porch in the cool evening air. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where children played in yards and neighbors waved to each other. It was so far from where they'd been a year ago, that cramped apartment, the fear, the uncertainty. His phone rang. "Vivian. How's the new house?" "Perfect. Chaotic, but perfect." Noah sat on the porch steps. "Thank you again for everything. None of this would have been possible without you." "You saved my life, Noah. This is nothing compared to that." "No, I mean it. You didn't just give me a job, you gave me back my self-respect, my purpose, my belief that I could matter again. That's worth more than money." There was a pause, then Vivian said softly, "Can I tell you something? That day at the funeral, when I was trapped in that casket, I prayed for someone to see the truth. And you appeared like an answer to a prayer I didn't think would be heard. You gave me my life back, but you also restored my faith in humanity. In a world that often feels cold and selfish, you proved that good people still exist, that courage still matters. That one voice can change everything." "It goes both ways," Noah said. "You took a chance on a broken janitor with a questionable past. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You taught me that redemption is possible, that second chances exist, that people can rebuild their lives from rubble. So thank you, Vivian, for seeing potential where everyone else saw failure." They talked for another hour about the company, about upcoming projects, about life. When they finally hung up, Noah sat on his porch for a long time, thinking about the strange and beautiful path that had led him here. 1 year became 2. The house filled with furniture and memories. The dog, Thunder, a rescue shepherd mix with soulful eyes, joined their family. Eli grew taller, smarter, more confident. Noah's work at Clark Industries continued to transform the company, making it a model for workplace safety nationwide. His teaching position at the Emergency Services Training Institute allowed him to shape the next generation of first responders, sharing not just technical skills, but the wisdom earned through loss and recovery. On the second anniversary of the funeral, Noah was invited to speak at a national conference on workplace safety. He stood before hundreds of industry professionals and told his story, not just about saving Vivian, but about the journey from janitor to board member, from broken to whole, from giving up to fighting back. "I used to think that being broken meant being useless," he said to the audience, "that because I'd failed at the most important moment of my life, saving my wife, I had nothing left to offer the world. But I've learned that our broken places are often where our greatest strength lies, because it's in the breaking that we learn empathy, resilience, and the true meaning of courage." He clicked to a slide showing the bench at Riverside Cemetery. "This bench represents a moment when I had to choose between safety and risk, between silence and speaking up. I chose risk. I chose to speak up. And that choice changed everything, not just for Mrs. Clark, but for me, for my son, for hundreds of workers whose lives have been improved by the reforms we've implemented." Another slide, this one showing Miguel from Seattle with his daughter. "This is Miguel. 2 years ago, he would have died at work because the company culture discouraged speaking up about safety concerns. But because we changed that culture, because we created systems where every voice matters, he survived. His daughter celebrated her second birthday last month. That's why this work matters. That's why courage matters. That's why we can never accept that people are disposable. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, dozens of people approached him with stories about their own workplaces, their own struggles to implement change, their own moments of choosing courage over comfort. Noah listened to each one, offered advice where he could, and reminded them that change was always possible if you refused to give up. That evening, he returned home to find Eli and Thunder waiting on the front porch. His son had grown so much, nearly 11 now, all gangly limbs and big questions about the world. Thunder barked once in greeting, his tail wagging frantically. "How was the conference?" Eli asked as they went inside. "Good, really good. People seemed interested in what we're doing at Clark Industries." "Of course they were. You're changing how companies work. That's huge, Dad." Noah made dinner while Eli talked about his day, a science test he'd aced, a friend's birthday party this weekend, a book he was reading about space exploration. Normal things, everyday things, but Noah never took them for granted. Every ordinary moment was a gift earned through extraordinary struggle. After dinner, they sat in the backyard while Thunder chased fireflies. The summer air was warm and thick with the promise of another beautiful day tomorrow. Eli leaned against Noah's shoulder, comfortable in the silence that sometimes said more than words. "Dad, do you ever think about that day at the cemetery when you saved Mrs. Clark?" "All the time." "Do you think you would do it again, knowing everything that came after, the media attention, the stress, all of it?" Noah considered the question. Without hesitation, because Eli, that moment taught me something crucial. It taught me that our instincts matter, that our voices matter, that one person really can make a difference. And everything that came after, the job, the board seat, all of it, that's just proof that doing the right thing has ripple effects we can't predict. I saved one life that day, but the work that followed has saved many more. You're a hero, Dad. Nobody, I'm just someone who refused to stay silent when speaking up mattered. That's not heroism, that's just being human in the best way we can be. 3 years after the funeral, Vivian called Noah with news that would change everything one more time. Richard's trial is finally going to sentencing. The prosecution wants me to give a victim impact statement. Will you come with me? Noah didn't hesitate. Of course. The courtroom was packed with media and curious onlookers. Richard Clark, once a powerful businessman, sat at the defense table looking diminished in his orange jumpsuit. His lawyer had argued for leniency, claiming his client had been under tremendous stress, that he'd made a mistake in a moment of weakness. But when Vivian took the stand, her voice was steel. Your Honor, the prosecution has already outlined the facts of the case, how my husband poisoned me, how he planned to bury me alive, how he would have succeeded if not for Mr. Noah Grant's intervention. But I want to talk about what those facts mean. She looked directly at Richard, her expression hard. You didn't just try to kill me. You tried to erase me, to inherit my company, my legacy, everything I'd built. And you would have succeeded because 53 people attended my funeral and not one of them questioned my death. Not one saw through your performance. That should terrify everyone in this courtroom, how easy it was, how close you came to getting away with it. Richard looked away, unable to meet her gaze. But you didn't succeed, Vivian continued, her voice growing stronger. Because one person, a janitor you wouldn't have deigned to notice, saw the truth. One person had the courage to speak up when silence would have been safer. And because of him, I'm alive. I'm thriving. I'm running my company and making changes that will protect countless workers for generations to come. You wanted to bury me, Richard. Instead, you helped me rise. She turned back to the judge. I'm not asking for leniency. I'm asking for justice. For me, for every person who's been betrayed by someone they trusted, for everyone who's been seen as disposable. He needs to understand that actions have consequences, that people matter, that you don't get to destroy lives without accountability. The judge sentenced Richard to 25 years in prison. As he was led away, he looked at Vivian one last time, and Noah, sitting in the gallery beside Margaret, saw something flicker across the man's face. Not remorse, but something close to it. The recognition of what he'd lost, what he'd destroyed, all for greed and ego. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed Vivian. She gave a brief statement thanking the prosecution and the jury, then added, "This case reminds us that justice requires courage, the courage to speak up, to testify, to refuse to let evil succeed through silence. Mr. Noah Grant showed that courage when he stopped my funeral. The jury showed it today. And I hope everyone watching this will remember that when they see injustice, when they know something is wrong, their voice matters. Silence protects perpetrators. Courage protects victims. Choose courage." That night, Noah, Vivian, Margaret, Eli, and Emily gathered at Vivian's estate for a quiet celebration. Not celebration of Richard's imprisonment, but of survival, of justice, of the 3 years they'd spent building something better from the ashes of that terrible day. "I've been thinking," Vivian said as they sat in the garden, stars emerging overhead, "about starting a foundation, something focused on workplace safety, second chances, and supporting people who speak up about injustice. I'd like you to help me run it, Noah, if you're interested." Noah looked at her, this woman who'd become so much more than a boss or a friend. She'd become family, part of the constellation of people who made his life meaningful. "I'm interested. What did you have in mind?" They talked late into the night, planning a foundation that would provide legal support for whistleblowers, fund safety improvements at small companies that couldn't afford them, and offer scholarships to people like Noah, those who'd been knocked down but refused to stay down. "We'll call it the Second Chance Foundation," Vivian decided, "because everyone deserves one." 5 years after the funeral, Noah stood at a podium in a convention center addressing 2,000 attendees at the National Safety Council's annual conference. He was 50 years old now, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of hard-won wisdom. Eli was 15, confident and bright, sitting in the front row with Vivian, Margaret, Marcus, and dozens of others whose lives had intersected with Noah's journey. 5 years ago, Noah began, his voice carrying across the massive room, "I was a janitor making minimum wage, trying to keep my son fed and my rent paid. I'd lost my wife, my career, my sense of purpose. I was broken in ways I didn't know how to fix. And then I overheard a conversation about a woman being poisoned, and I had to make a choice. Stay silent and stay safe, or speak up and risk everything." He clicked to a slide showing the cemetery, the funeral, the moment everything changed. "I chose to speak up. And that choice didn't just save Vivian Clark's life. It saved mine too. Because it reminded me that I still had value, that my voice still mattered, that broken people can still do extraordinary things." The presentation continued, showing the work of the past 5 years, the safety reforms at Clark Industries, the hundreds of lives saved through improved protocols, the foundation that had now helped 300 people fight for justice in their workplaces. He showed statistics, success stories, the tangible proof that change was possible when people refused to accept how things were. "But here's what I want you to remember," Noah said, coming to his conclusion. "This wasn't about me being special or heroic. This was about seeing something wrong and refusing to ignore it. Every single person in this room has that same power. You can choose to speak up when you see unsafe conditions. You can choose to support workers who raise concerns. You can choose to prioritize people over profits. Those choices might be hard. They might be risky. But they're also how we create a world where everyone comes home safe at the end of the day." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. 5 years ago, a woman was about to be buried alive because someone chose greed over life. But she survived because one person chose courage over comfort. That's the lesson. That's what I'm asking you to remember. Your voice matters. Your choices matter. One person really can change everything. Never forget that. The standing ovation echoed through the convention center. As Noah left the stage, Eli met him with a hug that reminded Noah of everything he'd fought for. This boy, this incredible young man who'd survived his mother's death and his father's brokenness and emerged strong and kind and whole. "You were amazing," Eli said. "Thanks, buddy. But the real work isn't in speeches. It's in showing up every day and doing the hard stuff." "I know, you taught me that." That evening, the entire group gathered at a restaurant for dinner. Noah's chosen family, all the people who'd supported him, believed in him, helped him rebuild. Vivian raised her glass in a toast. "To Noah Grant," she said, her eyes shining. The man who stopped my funeral and started a revolution. The man who proved that second chances aren't just possible, they're powerful. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for refusing to let me die. And thank you for teaching all of us what courage looks like. To Noah, everyone echoed, glasses clinking. Noah felt emotion clog his throat. I can't take all the credit. Vivian, you took a chance on a broken janitor. Margaret, you believed in my vision even when it was expensive and disruptive. Marcus, you forgave me and supported my appeal. Eli, you gave me a reason to keep fighting. All of you, you're the reason this worked. You're the reason I'm standing here instead of still scrubbing floors and wondering if I'd ever matter again. He raised his own glass. So this toast isn't to me. It's to all of us, to second chances, to courage, to refusing to accept that people are disposable, to building a world where everyone's voice matters, where safety comes first, where doing the right thing isn't the exception, it's the rule. That's the world we're creating together. That's the legacy we're building. They drank to that, and the conversation flowed into laughter and stories, and the comfortable warmth of people who'd been through fire together and emerged stronger. Noah looked around the table at these faces, his family, chosen and given, and felt a contentment he'd never thought he'd experience again. Later, driving home with Eli beside him and Thunder in the back seat, Noah thought about the journey that had brought him here, from that cemetery in the rain to this moment of peace and fulfillment. It hadn't been a straight path. There had been setbacks, doubts, moments when giving up seemed easier than persevering, but he hadn't given up. Neither had Vivian or Eli or any of the people who'd stood by him. They'd all kept fighting, kept believing, kept choosing courage, even when fear whispered that silence was safer. Dad, Eli said, breaking the comfortable silence, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Noah glanced at his son, this almost man who carried Sarah's eyes and Noah's stubbornness and a wisdom all his own. You're already better than me, buddy. You're kinder, braver, more certain of who you are. I'm just trying to keep up. You taught me everything that matters, how to stand up for what's right, how to help people who need it, how to keep going even when things are hard. That's what I want to pass on someday. Then you will, and you'll make the world better for it. They drove through the city lights, heading home to their house with its yard and its memories and its promise of tomorrow. Thunder dozed in the back seat. The radio played softly. And Noah Grant, once broken but now whole, once silenced but now heard, once dismissed but now valued, knew with absolute certainty that every moment of struggle had been worth it. Because he'd learned the most important lesson of all, that courage doesn't mean never being afraid. It means acting despite fear. It means trusting yourself when no one else does. It means refusing to let the world stay broken when you have the power to fix even one small piece of it. And sometimes, just sometimes, that one act of courage changes everything. Not just for the person you save, but for yourself, for everyone watching, for the world that needs reminding that good people still exist, that hope still matters, that second chances are real. Noah had stopped a funeral 5 years ago and saved a life. But in doing so, he'd also saved his own. He'd proven that broken people can heal, that lost people can find their way, that one voice really can make a difference. That was the legacy he'd leave Eli. Not wealth or status or fame, but the knowledge that every single person has the power to choose courage over comfort, to speak up when silence seems safer, to act when others accept. That power lived in everyone. It just needed someone brave enough to use it. And Noah Grant, the man who'd stopped a billionaire's funeral and started a revolution, had shown the world exactly what that bravery looked like.